as you want, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hi, Jim.
Hi there, Marjorie. How are you?
Fine. Hey, I want to tell you before we begin, excellent job last night on the debate with
it was
the
great.
three
It was a good
Attorney
debate.
General
They were all good.
candidates, and I
Thanks.
believe you are doing tirelessly another debate tonight.
Yeah, actually, Lieutenant Governors on the Democratic side, that is tonight. Next week, Auditor and Secretary of State.
Wow, that's an ambitious schedule, Jim.
Thank you very much. Can I, before we start with our thank you for our
By the
topic.
way, do you see it at 7 o'clock on GBH2? What's
Yeah,
the deal?
it's 6:30 on YouTube, and don't ask me. Just go online.
Okay.
But it's live. It's not live. It's on Channel 2 at 7 o'clock. And thanks to all the candidates for agreeing to this, by the way. And as you know, the only reason the primary we're not doing is the Republican governor's race. First time ever, because Chris Doty said he'd be glad to participate. Jeff Deal said he would not, and so we're not doing it. Before we get to our first topic, I just want to comment on CNN is playing live, or I guess moments ago, a few minutes ago, Nancy Pelosi landed in Taiwan. And we're not going to get into this today. I wish we had time for it. Can you answer a question for me? She is elected by the constituents of one of 435 House seats.
Right.
She is the Speaker, but she is elected by the people of San Francisco. The President of the United States and his team specifically asked her not to go to Taiwan because they were concerned about the impact on the relationship with China. Why should an individual congresswoman, even if she is the Speaker, fly in the face of the guy elected by the American people to conduct foreign policy for the United States? Right or wrong, he's the boss.
Yeah.
I don't get this at all.
I don't understand either. I think it's unnecessary. I mean, on the one hand, I don't want China dictating where and when our politicians should be visiting what countries. On the other hand, I just think it was unnecessary. I mean, don't you want to check these things out with the President of the United States, given the tense relations?
She's not only not checking it out, she's contradicting the guidance.
I don't get
it. That, in any case.
And I think enough with the 4-inch heels. She doesn't need them.
Well, I knew you'd get into that. That's why I didn't want to bring it up. Having said that, let's move on to what we wanted to talk about. 6 games. As you probably know, that's a suspension doled out yesterday by the NFL's arbitrator, retired judge, whatever you want to call it, Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson, for violating the league's personal conduct policy after 24 lawsuits alleging sexual harassment and assault. No fines, just 6 games. And that's after the 16-page report out of the retired judge hired by the NFL said that basically what he did was, quote, predatory and egregious. We're going to hear from Trenni Kusnierek in a few minutes. But we want to open the lines by getting your thoughts on, is this yet another example of the broken system within the most popular sport in America, pro football, for handling misconduct and the treatment of women? Is it time, or is it long past time, to just turn it off? And if we don't turn it off, are we enablers of this kind of behavior? Give us a buzz or a text. 877-301-8970 is our number. You can tweet us at BOS Public Radio. Can I make a couple of comments about this? This judge, what's her name? Robinson? Retired judge.
I think so.
While she said it was
Sue
predatory
Robinson.
and egregious, said it was non-violent sexual assault.
I don't
Can you
get that.
explain to me give me an example of non-violent sexual assault? Isn't that oxymoronic?
I don't understand what she means. She means that he would have had to punch someone in the face.
I assume that's what it means. And if it turns out you're one of the most fit and athletes in America, and you have a woman giving you a massage, and you tell her what to do or put her hands on certain parts of your body, the fact that he doesn't need to use physical force means it's not violent. Can I put this in context for a second? Tom Brady, and TB12 is right across the street here.
That's right.
Tom Brady allegedly deflated a football. Who cares? He was suspended for 4 games.
4 games.
This guy is credibly accused of sexual harassing or assaulting 24 women at least.
With whom he's settled civil lawsuits.
Right,
In 23 out of the 24. He has settled civil lawsuits.
So he gets 6 games. He only gets 2 additional games.
He paid the money, that's what that means.
Obviously, which means guilty as charged. You know, the other thing, Emmett Price, who's with us, one of the Revs every Monday, is a huge football fan. And I think if you're a faithful listener of the Revved Up segment, you know that he stopped listening to the sport he loves watching years ago for 2 reasons.
He's a man of principle.
Concussions and racism.
Yep.
And you add this to this is grotesque. just grotesque. We want to know what your reaction to it is. You don't need to be a football fan to comment on this. And if you are a football fan, are you just going to whine about it today and turn on the TV? When's the league? I think preseason games start soon or whatever it is. The season itself probably starts end of August, early September. Or are you going to stand up and say, I'm not going to support this product because of the lack of respect they have for women? We should say one technicality. The two sides to this, I think it's called an arbitration. The players' union has agreed to this retired judge's recommendation.
Correct.
Obviously, because they can't believe he's only getting 6 games suspension. The NFL has till Thursday night to appeal this. If they don't appeal, I think the American public, if you don't like this kind of behavior, has got to do something about it. And we want to know if you are. And are you going to do something about this? You're a football fan.
Oh, well, I'm a fair weather
Well, you
football
watch it,
fan.
don't you? You
I
gonna watch it?
I watched the Super Bowl. I watched the
Are you
Patriots.
going to watch it?
It will not be a sacrifice for me to give up watching the NFL.
But would you
Jim.
give it up?
Sure. It wouldn't bother me. I mean, it's not like a big sacrifice to me. It's not like giving up, I don't know, watching the March Madness or something, the last 4 games or something like that. It wouldn't bother me to give up. But it's not really making a big sacrifice for me. It's kind of like, giving up broccoli for Lent. You know what I mean? It's not really a big deal.
Well, would you give up broccoli for Lent?
I would give up. I would give up broccoli for Lent.
877-301-8970.
You know what? Let me just say one thing though. He's a big deal. Big star.
$230 million.
So you can imagine, because he was looking for these women online. I think it was on Instagram or something else.
Yep.
He was looking for these women online. So, presuming at least some of them knew who he was. Imagine their excitement. You got this big pro football star coming to your house. You can talk about how you had this big pro football star coming to wherever you do your massages. You probably figure you're going to get a good tip. You probably figure the guy's got a lot of money. And then to have this happen and to have, as has been reported, implied, at least in 2 cases that I know of, to say, you better be quiet about this because, you got a reputation. And in other words, he could ruin their reputation very, very easily. And and we should hear from one of these women who was on Real Sports with Brian Gumbel.
Ashley Solis.
Ashley Solis. She has shared her account of what happened on HBO's Real Sports with Brian Gumbel, and she says he exposed himself to her, and she covered him with a towel, and then
he requested that I work on his abdomen. But the moment I went above his navel, he told me he didn't want me to work there. He wanted me to work lower. He just kept directing me to go lower and don't be scared. You can go in there. And I just started really freezing up at this point.
Can you explain that?
Like a wave just took over my body. I felt so hot. I was sweating. It was getting more and more clear that this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I thought the session was going to be.
I want to return, before we get to the calls and the text, to this conclusion by this pathetic judge that this is nonviolent contact. And repeat the same thing I said. So when a pro football player, arguably one of the best pro football players there is, directs a woman to do something of this kind of nature.
And it got much worse.
And the fact that he doesn't use physical violence to force her to do it means it's a non-violent interaction. I just don't understand it at all. I don't understand her conclusion. She said it was predatory. She said it was egregious. And the guy gets 6 games.
And she called it sexual assault.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, there's kind of a violence implied in an assault.
That's the point I was trying to make. Inartfully, you made it better than I. What is our number? 877-301-8970. On the phone, the first call, a perfect first call, is a woman sports reporter we've mentioned before when Melissa's called in, who took her right to access to a locker room to only the Supreme Court of the United States. I think I can say both her names. Melissa Lutsky, it's great to talk to you.
Thank you for calling, Melissa.
Welcome to the show. What's up?
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
You'd know, first of all, Jim, it wasn't quite the Supreme Court, but the decision ended in the district court.
Okay.
The Southern District Court of Manhattan.
Federal court, okay.
The court of our country. So I'll leave it at that. But
Okay.
It actually had a ripple effect that might as well have gone to the top court. So anyway, of course I'm outraged. I mean, we need to somewhat put this in context. I was recently also on Brian Gumbel's show, looking at some of the sexual abuse and sexual assault that's happening to women who are reporting these stories. This is not even to women who are working in as a massagers. This is rampant throughout professional sports. Sadly, it's also rampant in, women's professional sports where you have coaches in both the gymnastics world and the soccer world. So this is a very, very present danger for both women athletes and also women who are associated with some of these athletes. And the fact that these leagues, the NFL stands out. I mean, Dan Snyder in Washington, D.C., the owner of the Washington NFL team, it's outrageous that he is still allowed to be the owner of that team with the culture that he's created, the misogynistic culture that he's created in that organization. And the NFL has done nothing to stop him.
Melissa,
nothing to stop him.
I think you mentioned journalists being harassed for reporting these stories. What I wasn't aware of that. What's going on?
Oh, absolutely. No, the women who are covering sports today are dealing with sexual harassment.
Wow.
Brian Gumbel did the show on HBO a year ago where he had 4 women who had covered various sports, many of them in the baseball world. The Mets organization, from the front office down to the manager of the Mets, was let go because of sexual abuse and sexual harassment of women covering the team.
Melissa, was it on Brian Gumbel where 2 of the women read out loud some of the texts they had gotten?
Absolutely.
And they are
Absolutely.
on. We should have thought of that before, Melissa. I'm really glad you called and really glad you broadened the discussion.
Yeah, the two women you're talking about, Sarah Spain and Julie DeCaro.
Yes.
That's right.
Written out in that.
That's
that was
right.
Not actually on Brian Gumbel, but that was a YouTube that went viral. Thank goodness, because 2 men who hadn't read the texts were asked to read these texts while looking at the women that the text.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
And it was the men cried as they were reading them because they couldn't believe the texts that were sent to them. So this is rampant. I'm glad you're talking about it. It is, it's just been around for a long, long time. And, women just don't count for much, particularly when put up against the salaries, and the business.
Melissa, even though you were required to correct me 2 times in 2 minutes, I'm thrilled you called, as always. Melissa Lotke.
Thank you very much for the call, Melissa.
Very much for your work and your call.
877-301-8970. You can call us or text us at that number. Jim is asking, well, I guess I'm here, so I'm asking it too. Are you
I think you actually are here. I don't think it's a guess. I think you are here.
Sacrifice and not watch the NFL as our buddy Emmett Price is courageously doing as a matter of principle. Katie from Weston, thank you for calling.
Hey, Katie.
Hey, guys, can you hear me?
We can. Thanks for calling. What's up?
Oh, great. First time, but long time.
Thank you.
So I've been a massage therapist for 27 years.
Oh.
And in the Boston area. And I actually am astounded that there's not more rehabilitation going on for the player. So what I read yesterday is that he's going to have to only get massages from the massage therapist that the team chooses.
Correct.
Yes.
But, okay, so he's not fined any money. He's only out 6 games and he can still keep getting massages? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And our profession has worked so hard to become more part of healthcare. Mm-hmm. And this is just disgusting. I will not be watching the NFL ever again. And I work on pro athletes in this area, not NFL players, but other professional teams. And I'm aghast that there was not more repercussions for this.
Katie,
Yeah.
put us into the scene, though, since you are a massage therapist of many years, as you said, 27 years. If someone came to you, especially someone famous, someone who's in very good shape, presumably could physically had more strength than you, and put yourself in these women's shoes. What do you do?
Well, you're talking about the power play that's going on in the room.
Yeah.
It's a he said, she said situation. And from what the New York Times was talking about, Watson would say to these women, if they said, no, I don't do that service, he would say to them as he left, well, remember, you have a professional reputation to protect, and so do I.
Right.
So there's threats going on.
Exactly.
And when you're in that situation, when I was younger, this would happen to me, and you do get very nervous. It's very hard. We're trained in school to end the massage and leave the room, but that's really difficult to do when you have a star athlete right there.
Yeah.
And you think it could be good for your business. So, if they want you to touch a certain area, usually I would just turn them over. But I mean, you got to do something to try to change their attention from what you're doing, but they can be very, very powerful in how they want you to treat them. It's really a scary situation to be in.
It is
because
really scary.
you're also alone. You're alone in a room with someone too.
100%.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Katie, we really
thank-
appreciate your perspective. Thank you for calling. Call us again. By the way, some people are taking this even more broadly than I am. Bob in Rockland says, like Clarence Thomas and his wife, this football player should be in jail. So I don't know if that's a good comparison, but in any case, 877-301 8970.
Paul in Braintree writes and says the NFL did nothing to Mr. Kraft. Do you really expect they're going to do anything to an NFL major player?
He's about to get in the Hall of Fame, by the way, and he's done a lot of wonderful things. Always, that's the mandatory thing. But as you say, every time we discuss Bob Kraft, what did he choose never to do?
To help the women in the massage spa, because one of them was deported. One of them lost everything she had. One of them was in jail. These women paid a horrible, horrible price, and it does not seem that, unless he did it anonymously, and we don't know about it, he did nothing to help these women.
877-301-8970. We're talking about the 6-game suspension for Deshaun Watson. By the way, his contract is constructed in such a way, again, $230 million. I think it's the biggest one ever in pro football, I think for 5 years. It's constructed in such a way that the least money was in the first year, so that if there was some sort of suspension, even one as pathetically small as this, he'd suffer the least economic consequence. And again, no fines, a 6-game suspension, while Tom Brady got 4 games for allegedly deflating a football. I mean, really? Lynn in Westboro, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
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 My response to this is just really simple. I have been a lifelong football fan. I have 2 brothers. They never watched football. I did. I was the one who sat in front of the TV, but I do not do it any longer. I have quit because of everything that's happening. I have 2 daughters. And they grew up knowing that mom watched football, but mom doesn't watch anymore.
So what's their reaction to that,
women
Lynn?
are treated.
When they know their mother doesn't watch a sport she used to love, what's their reaction to that?
They're proud. They're just like I am. They stand up for what they think is right. And you know what? You got to make a sacrifice sometimes, and that's what we have to do.
Well,
and I think it's just. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I'm glad you're doing it, and I'm glad your kids are on board, and good for you. Lynn, thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
Ralphie from Hubbardston Gym says, for the first time, you and I agree on something. I actually stopped watching the NFL when Kaepernick took a knee in the NFL because he didn't agree with Kaepernick, thought they were pandering to Black Lives Matter. But he says, I'm glad you're thinking of joining us. Trump supporters, you're more than welcome to hang out on a Sunday and watch golf with us because we're not watching any more football. Well, Ralphie, I commend you for not watching any more football. I was with Colin Kaepernick. I think it was extremely courageous of him.
But Ralph is only
to
watching
take a knee.
Live Golf, the Saudi Arabian support.
That's right. Oh, Ralph, you have to text back and tell me if you're watching.
Did you see
the
that
Saudi Arabians
Greg Norman said that Tiger Woods turned down
$800
million?
million.
A man of principle, it appears, in this one instance. Anyway,
I guess so.
We got to take a break.
Okay, we're talking about whether you are ready to take the pledge, stop watching the NFL because of this latest disgrace, which involves Deshaun Watson getting a 6-game suspension for abusing in a predatory and sexually assaulting way at least 24.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Zoom, used by 500,000 businesses, a platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video, enabling real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects.
From the GBH Culture Desk, I'm James Bennett II with another edition of The Drop, a monthly newsletter of affordable entertainment and discovery in and around Boston. We've got the New England Synth Festival, the Mission Hill Arts Festival, and the Suga Diaries opening at the Brattle this weekend. Get ready for a meta movie, a film within a film about a cast and crew trying to make some cinema amid a COVID-19 lockdown. Sign up to get The Drop right in your inbox at gbhnews.org/The Drop.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Landmarks Orchestra, performing a free concert including Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Saturday night at 7 at the DCR Hatch Shell. Learn more at landmarksorchestra.org. That's landmarksorchestra.org. And Comcast Business, providing technology solutions for your starting or growing small business, including internet, phone, and Comcast Business Security Edge. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. Actual speeds vary.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the sixth game, the pathetic six-game suspension of Deshaun Watson from the Cleveland Browns, whether or not it's time for big changes in the NFL, and whether or not it's time for big changes in your viewing habits. If you're a fan, you can call or text us at 877-301-8970. The thing that I'm stuck on is the judge, retired judge who was the arbitrator here, this Robinson person, saying there was no violence. And I haven't articulated it well. You did, and another Melissa from Cambridge did too. Yes, this is a great As for the judge saying no violence presence in this abuse, I'd compare this with the reporting on domestic violence incidents where it is said when the man beats his wife in front of the kids were not harmed. Yes, they were harmed by witnessing the violence. Trauma is violence. That is a perfectly made point, and the one I was trying to make poorly. 877-301-8970.
Let's go to Pat in Newton. Thank you for calling, Pat.
Hey, Pat.
Hi, second time, long time.
Thank you. What's up?
I actually got on when the CTE issue was discussed a while back.
Oh, yeah.
That's the brain condition, chronic encephal, I can't pronounce it, but that's the brain trauma condition. Go ahead. Right,
the brain traumas. I grew up sharing football. It was one of the few things I shared with my father. And although I loved the game, I stopped watching then because I felt that the bottom line was that too little was done by the NFL. And here we have another situation where too little is being done. It's about time. For me, this is an issue where women have to start taking notice about their watching habits in regards to football. And a lot of women support this game, and I think that they really have to take a look at their viewing habits.
Pat, thanks for the call. By the way, I'm glad you made the point about a lot of women watch this game. You and I had this discussion maybe with Trenni a year or so ago. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of the viewers are women, which I don't think most people realize. Thank you much for the call.
I think we have a clip of the Washington Post video. Can we play that
Melissa
sound?
Ludke, when she called before, mentioned it was men. Was it the men who had sent the texts? I can't remember who were.
No. I think they were just men that read them.
Okay, read the text to sports reporters Sarah Spain and Julie DeCaro.
Received.
These are the ones she mentioned. This is just some of the many
when
they received.
When the men started tearing up.
Yeah, here we go.
One of the players should beat you to death with their hockey stick, like the whore you are.
I mean, okay, this is why we don't hire any females unless we need our sucked or our food cooked. This dumb.
I hope your dog gets hit by a car, you.
Hopefully this Julie DeCaro is Bill Cosby's next victim.
And by the way, if you weren't listening at the top of the show when Melissa was our first caller, she was saying it's not just these women who are massage therapists who were abused and the penalty for that negligible, to say the least. It's women who report on sports, she said, and these were some of these reporters, this Spain and DeCaro, and these are just symptomatic of the kinds of texts they received.
And you could hear the upset in their voices when they were reading
yeah.
these, and I think they were incredulous that this kind of thing was going on, but it does go on quite a bit, actually.
By the way, let me just say, despite the fact that it's heartening that every single person, I think, who was either called or texted, has said they're going to take a step. If they're watching, they're not going to watch anymore. They're going to take some action. It's sort of like our Amazon discussions. We have a discussion about Jeff Bezos locking people in his warehouse. We're all going to stop using Amazon. Amazon doesn't suffer much, and my guess is the vast majority of people are not going to be upset about this, or at least upset enough to take any action, which basically says, this judge's decision to me and the likely inaction of most viewers, consumers of pro football, is almost a license to do it. Again, this is the precedent now. If this isn't appealed by the NFL, the precedent is you can sexually abuse, harass, assault 24 women or more, and you lose 1/3 of a season. How pathetic
I think
is that?
they are going to appeal it. I think the blowback is huge.
Maybe.
I could be totally wrong, but who is saying that this is, except for this judge? I don't know what her problem is. She's a former federal judge, so that's a pretty high level.
And agreed to by the union and the NFL, by the way. So it isn't like she just jumped into the scene or something.
Yeah, I don't think people are going to think that's most anybody's going to think that's okay.
We have time for one more quick one. Kathy and Medway, you're next. Hi.
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 Hey, I wanted to call and say I'm 100% with you on boycotting the NFL. I have a couple of boys. I have my husband, and I guarantee I could risk my house that them and everybody I know will be turning that off.
Well,
I had a father who was like an athletic director, and he would just ban it. He's deceased now, but he was my role model, and we're not having it as women. We're going to stand up. We're not putting up with this anymore, and that's it.
Sounds like a pretty good family to me, Kathy. Thank you very much for the call, and I hope you find good alternative entertainment.
Okay, coming up, we're going to talk with NBC Sports Authority Trenni Kusnierek here at the Boston Public Library. We'll get her take on the Deshaun Watson story, her take on Bill Russell, and also a great comeback for these British soccer women. A really great story. Trenni Kusnierek is next. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Next time on The World, an unexpected summertime hit. In Norway, there's a super popular track recorded in Norwegian and Arabic. It's by the rap duo Carpe. The tune is fun and upbeat. It's also rooted in social commentary about identity and immigration. The story and the music next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Be revolutionary. UMass is the Commonwealth's flagship public research university and committed to the relentless pursuit of progress. Learn more at umass.edu. And Legal Seafoods. You can visit their newly renovated location in Kendall Square, Cambridge. Now open Monday through Saturday for lunch and dinner. Reservations available at legalseafoods.com. If it isn't fresh, it isn't legal.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan. We are live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online, youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now by Trenni Kusnierek, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. Welcome, Trenni.
Hi, guys. Spirited discussion about Deshaun Watson.
Yes, indeed.
We certainly want to get your take on this, what you think of the 6-game suspension, and also whether you think that the NFL is going to appeal this decision, because they are getting considerable blowback here.
So, well, my response to it was predictable. And disappointing. I guess I was sort of hoping that Judge Sue L. Robinson would take into consideration the sheer volume of women that he abused. But as you guys were talking about Julie DiCaro and everything she's gone through, she wrote yesterday that at least according to Judge Robinson's online resume, she does not have a history of overseeing cases of domestic violence. So it's not like her area of expertise. But she is the agreed upon judge between both the NFL and the NFL Players Association. But to me, I don't know how you can, in your decision, say that an act is predatory, say it is egregious and unprecedented, but then say, and what really, really bothered me is when she said that they were non-violent in nature.
That's what did it to me too.
And I'm thinking nonviolent. So now you're telling me that in order for a man to really be punished for sexually assaulting a woman, he has to punch me or choke me or strangle me in the process. He can't just forcing himself on me is not violent enough for you. Like, at what point? I just don't understand why there's always sort of this deference to the man in this situation. Why we constantly look at the victims as, well, why did you put yourself in that situation? Why were you messaging him? Why were you doing this? Well, how did you act when you were in there? Why did you allow him to do that? You tell me, like, I just sometimes I don't think that men understand, and not to get too off the topic of sports here, but sometimes I just don't think that they understand how terrifying it is to be a woman somewhere and have a man impose himself on you. I have never been, like, I would say full-on assaulted, but like one of the things that, I don't talk about very often, and it was just a one-off when I was living and working in Pittsburgh, and I had gone to a concert. I didn't drink very much. I remember this because I drove myself home, but there was a guy who kept talking to me at this concert in the bar, kept talking to me, and he followed me out of the bar and pushed me up against a wall and kissed me and stuck his tongue in my mouth. And to this day, I can remember what it tasted like. It tasted like, when you drink and it kind of tastes like pennies, like ironish or copper. And I can always remember that. And like a man, quite frankly, I don't think many men have ever been in that position where you had someone who is bigger, stronger, taller. You're terrified. You don't know if you can fight back. And what happens if you do fight back? And luckily, somebody came out as we were like away, and I was able to get into my car and leave. And I couldn't pick this guy out of a lineup today. I don't remember that. But I remember certain pieces of it. But I'm sure that if I did remember it all and remembered the guy's name, now someone say, "Oh, you're remembering it now. Now it's an issue." There's all these things, like, we just don't ever trust women when we say, this was wrong, this made me uncomfortable, this was inappropriate, and that is never enough. It's always back on the woman and what she did or did not do. And to me, I think everyone assumed because Sue L. Robinson is a female that she would side with women, but far too often I think women side with men.
But you bring up a great point, though. Shame on her if she did not spend a few hours talking to people who do know a lot about domestic violence, because I think there's all these misunderstandings. Why doesn't the woman leave? That's what you hear all the time. And most of the time they don't leave because they don't have any money, they have nowhere to go, and even if they do go somewhere, they're going to get found out. And the most dangerous time in domestic violence is when you do leave. That's when you're most likely to get killed.
Well, and also, like, if you're this massage therapist and this wealthy, very physically imposing person is grabbing you and pulling you, and you're in a small room, whether it's your home or a hotel room, and you're by yourself. Now, are you sure that he then isn't going to further physically harm you? I think a lot of times the way a woman views it is, if I can just close my eyes and not think about this, it'll be over in a second, and then I can get out of this room, and maybe I've escaped with minimal damage.
Yeah.
And like, that is something that I think so many people, but in particular so many men, have not been in a position to have to deal with that. So you don't know how terrifying and how intimidating it really is.
And by the way,
and again, not to say that like Sue Robinson should know this, and not saying that just because you're a woman you should side with women.
Wait a second.
You should.
You don't need experience with domestic violence as a judge to look at the facts in this case and understand.
Well, I think
she used the terms predatory, as you say.
I think you need to do your due diligence, because she's not a district court judge that's sitting in front of these cases all the time.
Well, you don't know that she didn't, but you think...
Well, I said if she didn't.
But if you have the objective facts in this case in front of you, even without context, can a judge say, as Trenni said perfectly too, this is nonviolent behavior that deserves a slap on the wrist?
I think judges make ignorant decisions all the time, from what I've seen, especially in violence cases, especially when they don't know anything about something. But you know what I loved about this too? This is so typical. What did Watson, his lawyer, say? all these women, they wanted this.
Right.
They wanted this.
They wanted it.
They
or
wanted-
the flip side is they want the money. So they're making it up because they want the settlement. They want the money. But the reality is you wouldn't have to settle if it didn't really happen because
Trenni.
you have a leg to stand on. And to say that you wanted it, like, no, I'm sure that these women, like, listen, a lot of, he solicited many of these massages right in the middle of COVID, right? So these women were probably out of work. They were probably desperate for money, trying to make something extra and make ends meet because they weren't able to do their daily job because they have the type of job that was essentially banned, right? Even I mean, maybe not in the state of Texas, but there were probably even some limitations in the state of Texas. And so you're maybe maybe you're trying to feed your kid or your dog or your cat or yourself or just like make a house payment or something. And you think, well, this guy's pretty rich. I can maybe charge him a little bit more than I would charge somebody else, and I'll make a little extra money to add to my unemployment
maybe get
under
him
the
as a
table.
regular client
and get
and
him
make
as
a lot of money.
Right, and maybe then he says to the running back or the wide
Exactly.
receiver or the defensive end, and then suddenly you've got all these high-profile clients. Maybe you're hired by the team, and then you have a steady job. Like, there are so many factors that go into it that this judge did not even take into account. As far as the appeal, sorry, you guys asked me that question off the top. I don't know if the NFL will appeal. They originally wanted a at minimum year-long indefinite suspension, which to me is what should have happened. Especially considering what the Cleveland Browns did in manipulating the contract so that Deshaun Watson was not financially punished for any of this either. He's only going to lose $345,000
Out of $230 million.
$230 million. Like, I'm sure to the average person, to me, $345,000 is I don't even make that much. That's a real hit. I'd be, below the line. But, for him, that's chump change. That's nothing for him. But here's where the NFL, I think, is between a rock and a hard place. They did... Part of the reason they collectively bargained an independent judge to handle these cases is because Roger Goodell was taking heat not just from NFL players and the NFLPA, but also from owners, that he was ruling with too heavy a hand and that he was in charge of too much and that there was not an objectivity in it, and they needed an independent person to handle the case. So if the NFL comes back and appeals and says, "I'm sorry, but we don't accept your ruling, I'm going to rule instead," it muddies the waters for them going forward once again. And then I think you might have pushback from the Players Association. So I don't know what they do. I think they have 2 more days. They have
Thursday night, yeah.
They have till Thursday night to file an appeal. I hope that they do, but it would not surprise me if they don't, because it then just further complicates
Can we
things.
go from abused women to celebrated women?
Yeah.
Can you tell the story? I knew nothing about European or women's football or soccer. Obviously, we know about the incredible women athletes who perform for the United States. Explain to people what happened over there that is one of the most momentous times
The Lionesses.
for women's football.
The
yes.
Lionesses have won. So we don't pay attention to this because it's the Euro. It's the European Championship, which is they have a Euro Cup for men's and women's soccer. And Germany has dominated. I think they've won like 8 of the last
that's
10
what's
titles. They're an absolute powerhouse. They're kind of like the United States is overall in soccer, right? Like they win just about everything that they enter. And the Lionesses, along with the male team, like they had not won any major international competition, I don't think ever. The men haven't won since 1961. And, obviously soccer, like American football, football there it's England's sport. It's their sport. And so the entire nation got behind this female soccer team. They had 87,000 people at Wembley Stadium over the weekend on Sunday to watch Germany take on England. And they won, I think, in the 104th minute.
Overtime, yes?
90,
Yes.
90, yes. I had to do the math in my head. Yes, 90, yes. It's 90 minutes. So 14 minutes in extra time, they scored the winning goal and they won the Euro Cup championship. And there was a moment where, and I forget the name, is it Chloe, the woman?
Chloe Kelly.
Yes,
Chloe
Chloe Kelly.
Who took off her top Brandy Chastain style after, way back in 1996, I think it was, when 99 when Brandy Chastain did it. And Brandy Chastain actually called Chloe Kelly and had a conversation with her and said, that because it was, I think, a little bit an homage of her, right? Because when you think about that Brandy Chastain moment, that started a trend for women athletes to, I think, excel at sports, but also participate in them more and see the strength and what you could accomplish as a female athlete on a high level. And to have that, what are we, 20, how many years away?
Long time ago.
23 years away from 1999. to have that happen again, to pay homage to her, Chastain, I thought that was very
Kelly
cool.
scored the winning goal,
Yeah,
by the
she
way.
scored the winning goal in the 104th
But
minute.
I remember when Brandy Chastain picked up her shirt and she had a sports bra.
People were like
people went crazy,
outraged.
But this time, no, right?
Well, no, because now I just think first of all, it's Europe. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming most of you have been to Europe. They
Topless beaches and
are
stuff, yeah.
much more comfortable with the human body
I don't know
than
about
we
England,
are.
by the way. England
Although
is not
England
Southern
probably
Europe.
not. That's
Yeah.
true. It's not like France, where literally there was once adult entertainment on my television at 2 a.m. I woke up and I was like, "What is that? What's happening in the hotel room next to me?" I was like, "It's on the TV I left on." So they're very open over there,
But also
MTV
you see the
there.
photo of the sports bras like body armor. I mean, that's
they
another
all,
thing.
but Brandy Chastain's was too, though. And,
It was?
and yeah,
I think back then, and I think again in places like England and the United States, we view women and our bodies as, to sort of draw that parallel back to Deshaun Watson, as, oh, well, you shouldn't do that. That's going to get the men going. How dare you put them in that position that they might get, excited about having you around. And the horror, I can see your six-pack abs where guys can run around. We've had a story in here before about I think it was a women's either high school soccer team or track team that was practicing in just sports bras. And the male coach, I think for a football team, complained that it was distracting to his players. And it's get over it. Women, I don't know if you have young kids or if you've been out and about where younger girls are right now. Nothing covers their midsection.
Yeah.
Every girl is on a pair of high-waisted mom jeans, a crop top, and then something it's called a shacket over it, which is a shirt jacket. And that's what all the girls wear. So I think it's just more accepted now.
Did you used to read Marjorie when she had her column in the Herald?
I don't know if I lived here when you had your
Did you
column
coin
in
the phrase prostitute?
I did not. Prostitute. It was a.
You wrote. You
That doesn't
used
seem.
it.
That
It was
doesn't
a
seem like
singer.
something you would say.
Oh,
No, she
Marjorie.
wrote
was
it.
talking
She did
about,
write it.
It was talking
Marjorie.
about these really
Young-
sexualized clothes for toddlers. So a toddler
With bare
who's a
midriffs
prostitute.
kind of
Yeah,
thing.
Oh,
I
sort of
wasn't-
the John Bonet thing. Remember, when she
Yeah.
that era of the dance moms and the gymnast, those types of things.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. But I'm looking at Brandy Chastain too. She's got it's a formidable. Those sports bras are formidable. Are they not?
I mean, they're not nothing's hanging out.
No,
it's just a
they're not little lacy, sexy things.
No, I mean
No.
they're just. If I had better abs, I would wear a sports bra all over town.
I need to wear a sports bra all over town. That's a whole other issue, but that's not for today.
Brandy does have great abs. There's no question about Brandy Chastain back when she pulled up her.
You know
up
what's
her shirt.
unbelievable,
What?
by the way? Even though you say it's not as much of a deal, we spent as much time talking about the sports bra on Chloe Kelly as we did talking about the historic victory of the British
Well, I was
women's
just
soccer
interested
team.
that it didn't seem to cause a ripple this time. And,
Yeah.
and with
Except with us.
Chastain, right, but with Chastain, it was a nonstop
It was.
discussion. Did she disgrace the sport? Did she disgrace herself? Was
can you
this a
believe?
terrible thing?
Even back then in 1999, when I was just a young, fresh kid out of college, I remember thinking, that's just dumb. It's just a sports bra.
Exactly.
It's she had she had soccer shorts on. It's not,
before we get to the next topic, I mentioned, I don't know what we were talking. Oh, we were talking about Deshaun Watson as opposed to an active principal. When I praised Tiger Woods for turning down $800 million from this LIV thing, the Saudi Arabian-backed golf thing, which gave tens, if not hundreds of millions, but not that much to anybody else, he deserves praise for that, right? It's not inappropriate praise.
Yeah, I
No.
mean, we praise Rory McIlroy for saying no, right? And we're kind of crushing guys who are doing it. I don't know the motivation behind it. I don't know if it's simply because he just can't fulfill the number of tournaments. Is he that's my thing. Before I'm oh yay, Tiger Woods, you're so high moral
right,
ground. Is he doing it because he really doesn't want to be a part of something that is tied to the Saudi regime? Is it because he really wants to support the PGA and the guys that are still on it, and he still wants to majors are still in his mind and what he wants to do, which is actually would be fine? Or is it because I'm not healthy enough to play in the number of tournaments they would want me to play in for the amount of money they want to pay me, so I'm not going to do it right now?
By the way, I don't know if either of you saw, I saw them on CNN, some of the mothers and wives, for the most part, I didn't see any men, of people who died in the Twin Towers on 9/11, talking about how disgraceful it was that Trump was sponsoring this LIV golf tournament 50 miles away from the World Trade Center.
Oh.
I mean, it's just
Not
They
just
were
that.
so
Did you see
powerful.
the story? Did you see the story about Trump burying Ivana at his golf club?
I did indeed.
Because
see
it was
that.
going to help him
With his taxes.
With his taxes. She's buried by the first tee. I wonder if she wanted to be buried
wait,
by
wait.
the first
Does it matter what she wants? Does it matter what anyone wants when it comes to that guy?
Wait a second. Did I mention on the air, I think, but if I didn't, well, I'll say it again anyway, on his statement about the death of Ivana, which actually was quite beautiful.
It was very nice.
It's on a piece of literature, or a posting or whatever. The top says the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Then is the statement, and the bottom of his tribute to his dead ex-wife is donate to this address to support Make America Great Again. It was a fundraising effort on the part of Donald Trump, his dead ex-wife.
I don't get. I mean, I could talk about that for hours.
don't.
I don't
Okay,
understand why people still are drawn to him, but you know. Okay.
Well, he's going to turn part of the golf club into a cemetery because it's going to help his taxes.
That's great.
Why not? She's dead anyway.
You know what I hope? I hope there's an earthquake and they all come up. And then you're stuck with it.
So let's talk about this story.
But only there, not anywhere else.
This was a very sad story about another hiker dying in Mount Washington. It talked about how this happened last Saturday, which was a hot day, but it gets very cold up there in Mount Washington. The hail can be very bad. The couple, you're a newly engaged person about to get married. The couple that saw this 65-year-old man on the way up the mountain was with his dog, a German Shepherd mix, said he looked great. They go up to the mountain, very romantic proposal at the top of the mountain with a ring he'd been carrying around for 2 months. And then they come down the mountain and see him.
And you know, the article, and I don't know, and
dead. Dead.
Yes,
Yeah.
he died.
Well,
they had to
dying.
actually carry him a mile down. And what the article in the Globe that I read yesterday, and please tell me if there's been an update to it, but they didn't talk about did he have a heart attack?
I don't know.
Was
it a broken arm and a gash in his head.
So I'm assuming he must have slipped and fell. I wonder what kind of gear he was wearing. I mean, I'm assuming if you're hiking Mount Washington with a dog, you're a somewhat experienced hiker, but I'm going to be honest. When I first moved here 10 years ago, I said, I really want to hike. And someone said, oh, go do Mount Washington. And I was like, okay. They're like, yeah, kids do Mount Washington. So I thought, well, how hard can it be? It took 7 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I went in sneakers and shorts. And I think I was smart enough to bring water in my backpack and maybe a sweatshirt or something. But I didn't bring, now when I hike, I bring Mylar blankets and first aid kits. But what happens and what people who are inexperienced, and I don't know how you change this because Mount Washington has just become this place I drove my car at Mount Washington and then went to the visitor center and went back down. But I think what gets lost is that the weather on Mount Washington is really unpredictable. And a lot of people don't know that what you should always do when you're hiking, especially in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, you should always check the Mount Washington Observatory Higher Summits forecast. There's a forecast that lets you know exactly what the conditions are and whether or not, quite frankly, it's safe to hike. It was foggy that day. Do you know who actually was at the top of Mount Washington that day? Meredith Goldstein. She did not hike. I know you look on your face. She did not hike.
She drove to the top.
She drove to the top and she took a picture by the thing. And she literally has her hooded sweatshirt up, pulled tight over her face, long pants on. She's clearly cold and miserable. And she's hunched over like this, but very proud that she did something outdoorsy. But she drove up. But I was like, wait, that was Saturday that you went? It was dense fog, high winds, and very cold temperatures. And in Conway, which is maybe 45 minutes from the base of where you would start to hike on the trail to Mount Washington, it was 85 degrees and sunny on Saturday. So the difference in temperature and the fluctuation that can happen. And this is not, there was, I think a week before I hiked half of the presidential traverse. I did Madison to Washington. And the week before, a guy tried to do the presidential traverse and he was also solo hiking. He died on Mount Washington because he did not, it was so cold, it was snowing and hailing, and he got caught in bad weather. And his family said he was a fairly experienced hiker. I think he had hiked 20 or more of the 48 peaks in the Whites. But it is, I think we just sort of take for granted, oh, yeah, it's bad, but it's only bad in the winter. And if it's nice down here, it's okay to go. It is, I think it needs to be stressed a little bit more how difficult the hiking is out east. It's much more technical and difficult than people realize.
Also,
I want to point out, did you see who wrote this piece?
I just noticed.
Who? Gia Orsino. She's a correspondent for the Globe, and she's on our staff here at BPR. I didn't even realize that.
Good for Gia.
So it was a really excellent piece, and the couple that...
it's just so sad.
Well, can I tell you, there's also another issue.
Sad.
We're only talking about the hikers, and you got to be careful. There are a ton of stories of incredibly courageous rescuers
Yes.
who put themselves at great risk.
Oh, they did CPR for 40 minutes.
There was a guy, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name, he was with me on Greater Boston a few months ago. He was a world-class mountain climber when he was young. He and a partner, another world-class climber, when they were late teens, I believe, went up Mount Washington. They couldn't find their way back. The rescuer who attempted to find them died in an attempt to get them. He lost his legs, and if you recall, I don't know if you saw that night, he is the scientist at MIT who invented, developed these prosthetic devices that respond to your brain.
Yes.
They're not physically connected, they're neurologically connected. So, I mean, something wonderful came out of this horror. But the point is that it's not just the climber who's got to be careful. The climber has to think about putting other courageous, caring people at risk. If something before, I don't get it, by the way. I understand challenges.
No, I
It's
would
not
not
one of
But
mine.
I mean, listen, I'm going to be honest. Like, if you're in decent shape and you go on a nice day, you can hike. I don't want to make it seem like it's impossible. You can hike Mount Washington. Like, I hiked it at the end of a thing. But on that day that I did half the Presidential Traverse, my goal was to do the entire Presidential Traverse in one day. But it was so hot and I was getting so dehydrated. And drinking so much water and getting like ringing in my ears that I actually bailed halfway through because I said to my friend Sarah, I'm putting you, my hiking partner, and myself in danger. Like if I keep going and I pass out or I get dehydrated, like Mount Washington's the last real easy bailout point where you can pay. By the way, do you know what it costs to take a shuttle down off Mount Washington?
No.
$50. $50 I had to take so I could get driven down. But you have to, but not a lot of people, like, you know, not enough people realize the danger and what the situation you're putting others in when you decide to try and push through when, like, just go back and do it another weekend.
I think I'll take a pass. We're done, Marjorie.
Yeah, you know what was? I couldn't believe it because I went up Mount Washington when I was a kid, and I
You
couldn't
did?
believe
You
when
drove
I
or you hiked?
hiked, and I couldn't believe when I got to the top. What are all these cars doing here?
Oh, I know. You can just drive up. You can take the Cog Railway. Do you
I
guys
had
know
no
it's a thing?
idea.
Do you guys know it's a thing to moon the train, the Cog
You're supposed
Railway?
to moon I did
like
not know
people
that.
who
Yeah,
hike
that's
the
a good
Appalachian
reason to
Trail.
hike in and of itself.
I did it since I wasn't going to finish the Presidential Traverse. I met this couple. They're like, "Do you want to moon the trailway with us?" And I was like, "I do, because that will make my day. At
That's
least
so
I've accomplished
moving.
something."
Okay, we've been speaking with NBC Sports anchor and reporter Trenni
Really glad to
Kusnierek.
hear that.
Coming up, abortion rights are on the ballot today.
Never allowed back.
Never allowed back. Abortion rights are on the ballot today in Kansas. Carol Rose from the ACLU of Massachusetts joins us on reproductive rights here in the Commonwealth and around the country. They are hanging in the balance. You are listening to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library in Copley Square. You don't need tickets. You can just show up and stay as little as long as you want. We'll be right back.
I'm Frank Oglesby, voice of the T. The doors are opening for Smart Conversation with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Local perspective, local voices. Welcome aboard, Boston's local NPR.
Support for GBH comes from you and Shriners Children's Boston. Accidents happen, and when those accidents involve a burn injury of any size, Shriners Children's Boston is the place to turn for any burn. Shriners Children's Boston, the most amazing care anywhere. Get a dramatic and intimate look inside the Russian assault on Kharkiv, as told by families, civilians, and first responders. Watch Frontline, Ukraine, Life Under Russia's Attack, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
I'm State House reporter Katie Lannon, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, in the aftermath of the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade, Governor Baker signed legislation protecting abortion rights in the Commonwealth. Carol Rose, the head of the ACLU of Massachusetts, will stop by to discuss on the day that voters in Kansas prepare to strip their constitution of a right to an abortion. Then it's Lee Pelton of the Boston Foundation explaining how skyrocketing housing prices have pushed Boston's rental market to become the second least affordable in the U.S.
Boston Globe travel writer Christopher Muther on why a whopping 1/3 of Americans feel guilty about taking vacations, and the coastal grandmothers leading this summer's hottest new fashion trend is about time. GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen gives us his local arts and culture rundown and a review of Brad Pitt's new movie, Bullet Train. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has landed in the capital of Taiwan. This is the highest level American government visit to the island in a quarter of a century. And as NPR's Emily Fang tells us, the visit has angered China, which has raised the possibility of military action.
Pelosi's plane touched down late Tuesday night Taipei time after days of speculation about whether she would make the trip. She is expected to meet Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen and various Taiwanese legislators Wednesday. Pelosi's visit has been closely watched in China, which has strongly opposed the trip. China's military has been holding live-fire military drills off its eastern coast opposite of Taiwan this week and flown fighter jets close to Taiwanese waters. And it extended new military drills in the East and South China Seas until August 6th through Pelosi's visit. That's raised fears China could retaliate to Pelosi's visit through military action, such as blockading the waters around Taiwan. Emily Fang, NPR News.
More than 20 years after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the Biden administration says it has killed the leader of al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Once deputy to Osama bin Laden, Zawahiri was considered a planner of the 9/11 attack and others. He rose to al-Qaeda's top position when the U.S. killed bin Laden in 2011. Now, President Biden says the U.S. found Zawahiri in Kabul, Afghanistan. And Pierre Steve Inskeep is there with details of the U.S. strike.
The first sign of something going on was the sound. People woke to at least one early morning explosion here, and they began sharing images of a multi-story house with the windows blown out. All through Sunday, rumors spread that it might have been a drone attack, but it took a couple of days before Biden and the Taliban both confirmed that.
NPR's Steve Inskeep reporting. 6 states are holding election primaries today: Washington, Michigan, Kansas, Missouri, Ohio, and Arizona. NPR's Deepa Shivaram says the congressional midterm elections are a little more than 3 months away.
All eyes are on Arizona, especially the GOP primaries for governor and senator. Former President Trump has backed Kari Lake in the race for governor, and on the Senate side, he's backed Blake Masters. Both Lake and Masters had healthy leads in recent polling. Also in Arizona are 2 Republican candidates for Secretary of State who continue to spread lies about the 2020 election, saying it was stolen from Trump. And in Kansas, abortion is on the ballot. Voters there will decide on a measure that would change the state's constitution and potentially further restrict abortion. It's the first test of voter sentiment since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down more than 100 points. This is NPR News.
From the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Craig Lamolt. Transit advocates are disappointed that legislature didn't include a low-income fare program for MBTA in the transportation bond bill that passed Sunday night. Despite the setback, Susanna Bomi of Community Labor United says advocates aren't giving up on their efforts.
We do have strong champions in the legislature, and we're not going to stop asking our elected officials to do the right thing and stand by riders who are struggling to pay the fare.
Bomi says the legislature approved a low-income fare program last session, but it was vetoed by Governor Charlie Baker. She says she's hopeful a new governor will approve a means-tested fare policy, which they're planning to resubmit next year in the new legislative session. A new law signed by Governor Charlie Baker will look to ensure that students at the state's public colleges and universities can get abortion pills. The provision is part of a larger legislative package expanding reproductive and gender-affirming healthcare in Massachusetts. Taylor St. Germain with the group Reproductive Equity Now says the measure will break down barriers to abortion access.
What this legislation was intended to do was to normalize medication abortion as a part of healthcare and put it where students already are, which is on their campuses and in campus health centers.
The law requires public colleges to submit a medication abortion readiness plan by November of 2023. Partly sunny today, high around 92. A chance of showers this evening and tomorrow, sunny and temperatures in the mid to upper 80s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include DuckDuckGo, a privacy company committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer private search and tracker blocking with one download. DuckDuckGo. Privacy simplified.
It's 12:06. I'm Craig Lamolt. For more original reporting, visit gbhnews.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Marjorie. Joining us now is the Executive Director of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, Carol Rose. Hello, Carol.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Great to have you.
So, Carol, Jim and I were talking before the show, it's kind of like a tale of two votes. We had the legislature and Governor Baker signing into law abortion protections here and shielding both providers and patients and changing the law so that beyond the Roe law so that you could, if you had a severe fetal anomaly, that you could get an abortion right here in Massachusetts past 24 weeks. Something entirely different is going on in Kansas.
Right. Well, it's so interesting. You talk about a tale of two votes. It's exactly right. So in Kansas today, they're putting an initiative on the ballot for a popular ballot vote that would actually enable people in Kansas to say that they don't want to have state-level protections. So if the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision, removed federal constitutional protections when they overturned Roe, in Kansas, they're trying to overturn it at the ballot. In contrast, in Michigan and Vermont, there are also popular ballot initiatives. Those are coming up in November, and those would actually expand and protect abortion rights. So we're seeing the battle being taken to the states. And that's why what the state legislature here in Massachusetts did is so important and so historic, because that's where the battlegrounds are going to be in the states. And this bill that was passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Baker is really historic in the protections that it extends to say that we're going to protect providers. We're not going to collaborate when states like Texas or Missouri try to have a long arm reach extrajudicially, go across from them to us and try to prosecute either people seeking abortion health care here or providers giving abortion health care here.
Can we, but the thing I don't understand about our law, Carol Rose, I understand how it has the ability legally to protect a Massachusetts provider providing services to a woman from Texas. I don't understand how we can, I'm not even sure we're trying to, but you'll clarify it, the woman from Texas herself. If it's illegal to get an abortion under the following circumstances,
right,
and you get it beyond the borders, why can't they act against you should they choose to when you get home?
So,
do we insulate that person?
So the person, where you travel is where it matters. It's a little harder, Jim, in terms of when you're talking about telemedicine, and that becomes, what is the service? Is it like just talking to someone or advising them on their rights? Is that First Amendment protected? I think it should be, and it probably would be. Very different than if a provider from Massachusetts were to go to Texas, for example. So it has to do with where the person's residing at the time that the health
service
procedure
is provided.
where the service
and residing
is provided.
Could mean just being here to get the services.
Right. Now, I think this is all going to be litigated in the coming weeks and months. But I think the law is pretty clear on that. I've said to my staff, who knew we'd ever have to have a legal memo on the Fugitive Slave Act? But here we are. Once again, talking about fundamental liberty interests and what protections people need to have in order just to go forward and carry out their lives with themselves and their families.
By the way, since we've been trashing the legislature nonstop for their pathetic disappearance yesterday for 5 months, we should congratulate them not only in getting this abortion dispute resolved, but also Baker for signing it. Just to be clear about the Kansas thing, and the reason it's so significant beyond what you said, this is the first opportunity that voters have gotten to speak on an abortion right. The Constitution of Kansas, I didn't know this till last week, actually has a right to an abortion in the Constitution. The vote today could remove that from the Constitution,
Yeah.
which would allow the legislature to do whatever the hell it wanted.
Right, and then presumably the Kansas legislature would then ban abortion. And
Yeah.
what's also sort of very troubling about the way this is set up procedurally is they're doing it today, which is at a primary day where you have very low voter turnout
Yeah.
generally
That's a very
in
good
Kansas, rather than waiting for the November general election when more people would have an opportunity to have their voice heard. Because the polls show, certainly here in
close.
Massachusetts, overwhelmingly people, whatever they personally might believe about abortion health care, they believe the government shouldn't be deciding, but the people in consultation with their doctors and with their family members and their other children, taking into all those things, that we shouldn't have a bunch of government people deciding how we can control our bodies and what health care we have a right to. So I think the vast majority of people agree with it. Whether or not it's going to be framed in a certain way on this ballot petition in Kansas, and whether the fact that it's on a primary day rather than a general election day could in fact have it tip the other way, and that'd be really unfortunate and scary.
Two things I wanted to add. Our staff is pointing out that from the Kansas City Star, they're reporting that this anonymous group, it's a confusing vote, the way that it's written, and that this anonymous group is sending this misleading text to Kansas voters telling them to vote yes to protect choice when in fact they should be voting no.
Right,
to
because
protect
they know
the
that
right
if
to
people
abortion.
actually understand it,
Yeah.
they understand that, again, it's a very personal decision, and it's a fundamentally important decision for people to make in consultation with their family members and their doctors. And the notion that I don't think very many people actually believe that government should be in there into your bedroom deciding
It doesn't seem the appropriate moment for people in government, politicians, to be making moral decisions about people.
Indeed.
They're not really the ones that should be
I
doing
believe
that.
that's a glass house.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But I do love, I said this yesterday when we had the Revs on, I'll say it again today, those two nuns sticking their neck out in
boy.
Kansas, going up against the Catholic Church and saying this is disgraceful, and that the legislature has made no provision for poor women, for
Right.
health care, for child care, for anything to help women with their children once they
Once
are
they're
born.
born.
And
Exactly.
it just, and including the Catholic Church, which has done almost nothing.
Including their archbishop, who is actively lobbying to repeal the provision in the Constitution
Oh, it's just so
that they're saying people
Right.
should vote to protect.
Yes, I think
Good
the
for
Catholic
them.
Church, if they were really interested, could do a hell of a lot more in this front too, because I didn't see them out proselytizing for the Build Back Better bill that Joe Biden was proposing, or for that matter, for Obamacare.
Right.
So I hope we're not going to confuse people for 2 days in a row. We had the Attorney General with us yesterday, and we were talking about the move that the governor made, which sunk a provision that would have provided for free phone calls for people who are incarcerated. In a minute, I want you to tell people why free phone calls matter and non-free phone calls are harmful, and not just as a humane act, but in terms of recidivism and things like that. But to explain it to people without giving them a headache, what the governor attempted to do, or did do, was sent back the free phone call provision with an amendment. The amendment attaching to it what he wanted to do, which was expand dangerousness hearings. Dangerousness hearings are pretrial hearings where you can hold someone without bail if a judge determines it's appropriate. He wanted to expand those kinds of hearings to things like sexual abuse of children, human trafficking, etc. The House of Representatives didn't want to do it. The Senate was okay with it. They didn't resolve their differences in time. So as a result, both things died. His Baker's attempt to expand the definition of dangerousness hearings and the attempt to do free phone calls. Before we get to the dangerousness thing, explain why free phone calls matter so much if you're incarcerated, and why the absence of free phone calls is so inhibiting.
Right. So, I mean, it's really expensive. And one of the things that we've learned is that, I mean, the vast majority of people who go to jail or prison end up going back to their homes, back to their communities. And what the studies have all shown is that when people are able to keep in contact with their loved ones, with their communities, they have a much better rate of coming back and being rehabilitated, brought back into community than you do when
Recidivism goes down.
Recidivism goes down. People are able to go back, and often because if they have substance use disorders or mental health issues or something, that ability to retain that connection to their families and their loved ones actually creates greater public safety in the long run. And plus, you don't really want the state profiting on the backs of people using phone calls.
Okay, so
and
on
that's a problem too.
On the dangerousness issue, a lot of civil liberties groups, including yours, were against this expansion. Is that true, or are you in that number or not?
Well, absolutely. We think that trying to expand pretrial detention kind of violates the rule against innocent until proven guilty, right?
Okay, here's what Maura Healey had to say about this
Okay.
yesterday. We asked her about it. The Attorney General was with us. And we asked her about this combination of the two measures, in particular, whether she supported what Governor Baker was trying to do. Here's Maura Healey.
I support expanding to include rape and sexual assault. You know, these are instances where there have been serial rapists who have been released and then go out and commit more rapes and sexual assaults. I hope, Jim, that the legislature works this out. I know that they continue to be in discussion, but I hope that the legislature and the governor can work out this legislation. I think it's important all around.
So my understanding of most of the critics, including you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is not only a due process issue, but that this pain is mostly visited on people of color.
Absolutely.
The flip side is you can't be held if there's a request for a dangerousness hearing under this expansion that didn't become law unless a judge determines. It isn't like a unilateral determination by a prosecutor. A judge has to make a determination that the dangerousness law, as expanded, had it happen, applies to you. So why is that not enough of a safeguard?
Well, so first of all, what Attorney General Healey is talking about isn't what the bill was. So it wasn't just in those certain instances. There were a lot of different instances.
Well, they were included, but more.
Right, but there were many more than that. So I think it's important to recognize that. And so I think to the extent that judges have that kind of discretion, they already have the ability to exercise it. So suddenly saying, and in all these other cases, there's going to be a default that you're going to be too dangerous to go home pre-trial, and then it hurts your ability to get a good lawyer, to actually defend yourself, to do all those things. So these are just like fundamental due process constraints. And what's interesting, though, I think, is that what the parliamentary maneuver that you were talking about earlier, which is that it was clear that this expansion of the pretrial detention wasn't going to go forward. And it was pretty clear that the no-cost phone calls was going to go forward. And what Governor Baker did was by attaching the dangerousness bill to the no-cost phone calls. It was a poison pill. And he knew he was going to lose on the dangerousness expansion, so he attached it to the no-cost phone calls, and that's what killed it.
Well, the only caveat about that, if I may, and I know listeners are getting tired of this because we've talked about it for 3 straight days, the reason it is a so-called poison pill is because the Democratic legislature has decided they allow poison pills by virtue of the fact that they need a 5 months vacation. Meaning, I mean that sincerely.
I know you've been talking about it.
Had they stayed in session, the Senate, which endorsed the dangerousness provision in tandem with the free phone call, and the House could have worked for a day, a week, a month, 2 months to resolve their differences. If they chose to either agree with the governor, which you wouldn't have liked, or overridden the governor, which you would have liked, they could have done that. The only reason Baker had that power is because they decided it was more important to go home than to move ahead on this dangerousness issue and the free phone call. That is factually accurate,
That
correct?
is factually accurate, Jim.
But there's one thing about this, and I wrote a lot of stories about this when I was at the Herald. In domestic violence cases, I'm sorry, I have no problem with, especially someone that's been multiply accused, because you know what happens, Carol. They get out. They've beat the you-know-what out of some woman, and then they're in jail, and they get out at 1 o'clock in the morning, and who knows what happens. So that's, and I get that there's a definite problem with racism here, where there's a lot more black defendants that are held than white defendants, but that one really bothers me.
Right, but I think what we need to make sure, Marjorie, is to take into account those narrow exceptional cases and not to have a really broad bill that would list a whole lot of different offenses that suddenly people would be held pretrial detention, because you just don't want to have that in a democracy. You want to make sure people actually have due process pretrial.
So what should happen to someone who's just beaten the you-know-what out of someone and gets picked up by the cops at 10 o'clock at night?
Well, I think mostly those people are held. I mean, that happens, but you don't get to hold them indefinitely.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily are held for that long.
Well, I think that I think there's some narrow things that we could do, some procedural protections, but what was proposed, what was on the table, was really broad and vague. And in that sense, that's not the kind of thing you want to have the legislature adopting without, as Jim said, a lot more negotiation, a lot more conversation.
What about the felony for cutting off the court-ordered GPS tracking device?
That's something, again, that I think we can have a conversation around, whether it's a separate crime or not to cut off the device. Already, you think about people on technical parole and probation violations and things like that. There's a lot of control that the state has over people that already exists. And the fact it's not clear why it may be politically popular to say let's have more pretrial detention and more police control. It's not necessarily necessary. It may be that we can actually just use the laws that we have already in place to make sure that people are kept safe.
And by the way, the unfortunate thing we should say is, while you said and we all agree there should be a discussion, unfortunately the discussion would have to be at the pool, which is where legislators will be when they're having the discussion.
Well, the one last thing,
Not
I mean,
to beat that same
in
drum,
general, it bothers me with people that are repeat offenders that do violent things. And this dangerousness thing would have said, you have to notify the victim. And that seems to be pretty basic, too. But it's not happening, right? There's no...
I don't know enough about what does happen already, Marjorie, but my understanding is that we have those kinds of protections in place that we need, and that this was sort of a popular political move, but that we have those protections in the existing law. We don't just let people out willy-nilly. There are dangerousness hearings that take place already.
They almost never happen, Carol. They almost never happen.
So is it a question of changing the law or actually using the laws that we have?
I don't know enough about it, but I just do know that they're a pain in the neck. People don't want to do them.
Wasn't that fault with the prosecutor? Admittedly, the categories are limited, and Carol would like to leave them limited, but within the limited categories, if there aren't dangerousness hearings, it's because they're not being requested by prosecutors.
Well, it's because the system is kind of screwed up. I mean, you have one prosecutor who's probably got 20 cases, and, it's a rotating door, and I think, we can all think...
But let's address the system where the harm is, right? As opposed to just saying, let's expand
the harm is to the victims.
The range of laws. But instead of saying, let's expand the power to have pretrial detention, how about saying, let's take a look at the powers that already exist and see if there are reasons, whether it's caseload or docket management or what a difference a DA makes, to make a decision about, are we doing it? Are we drawing the lines in the right way? The notion that we're just going to pass another law, there ought to be another law and another law. That won't change it if the laws in place aren't being used.
There's a real issue with the system being unfair based on race. But on the other hand, there's a real issue, I think, with people doing violent things. I mean, there are many cases that we can recall, particularly in domestic violence, where people do it over and over and over again. And it's scary for the...
I don't think you'd have many people disagreeing with that. I think it's not a question of what the problem is, it's a question of what the appropriate remedy is.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so let's only spend a minute on this because this is good news and it's theoretically resolved. Early mail-in voting, the Republican Party of Massachusetts challenged to the state's highest court. I mean, it's unbelievable. With a straight face, you can say, I believe in democracy, so let's limit the ability of people to vote in as simple a fashion as possible. And after the SJC said, no, Constitution does not prohibit early mail-in voting for no reason, right? Just because you want to do it, which is what happened during COVID and now is permanently under statute. Jim Lyons, who's the head, and I use the term loosely, of the state Republican committee, is going to appeal Supreme Court of the United States. He's not getting anywhere, correct?
No, I don't think he's going to get anywhere.
Okay.
But you never know with this court. I guess I should hedge my bets here. You never know with this court. But in terms of what logic and precedent and the law would tell us.
Oh, precedent. That's important.
Remember when that used to exist?
That used to matter. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so let's go to another good news story instead for a second. Another bill that was signed by the governors, this Crown Act.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think people understand remember the underlying stories. Before we talk about, one of those people appeared with Liz Neeslaus on my television show the other night. We'll have to hear what she had to say. Explain to people how this all came about, what the issue was.
So, this really started out with an ACLU case. So it was two young girls, Maya and Deanna Cook. They were both 15 at the time, young black women. And they were suspended from school, suspended from after-school activities, all these kinds of things.
Couldn't go to the prom.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It is actually quite horrible because their hair extensions violated some kind of dress code about being disruptive in the school, and so that's crazy. And it had things like your hair can't be more than 2 inches high off your head. It's clearly racist, right? It's clearly discriminates against people of color, particularly black people. And so we filed a lawsuit and said you can't do that. And so the ACLU brought that case. Ultimately, they changed the policy, but then better yet, the legislature took it up with the Crown Act, and it's a great acronym. It's Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. It's the Crown Act.
Didn't Healy get involved during your litigation as well with the school?
Yes, the Attorney General, Maura Healy. She wrote a letter on behalf, and so it really raised awareness in these two young women who stepped forward. It's hard to do that when you're 15, right, or any age. But they really stepped forward, and they really made the public story and raised public consciousness, so much so that we not only got the ruling, the adjudication, but we also got the law being passed, and it is a good news story.
Well, let's hear some sound. This is, as Jim said, from his TV show Greater Boston. Liz Neeslaus was filling in. Malden's Maya Cook was talking about the shame she felt when she was back in high school, 15 years old, getting punished for wearing her hair naturally, and the determination she felt to do something about it.
The first day that I came back to school, I felt really good. I felt beautiful. I felt more connected to my culture. And then the second day, after I got in trouble for it, I felt embarrassed. I felt shame. I just felt like dirty. I knew I wasn't going to stand for what was happening. And it also helped having my sister there too. We both knew that we weren't going to accept the treatment that we were getting from our school administration.
Yeah, good for them.
Pretty great. You know, Carol Rose, before you go, I know you're a big Trump fan, so this is a good question for you. There is an effort by an organization that is affiliated with Bernie Sanders to have Donald Trump disqualified from every state ballot should he choose to run for president, including an outreach to our own Secretary of State, Bill Galvin. And the theory goes something like this. The 14th Amendment prevents, correct me and stop me at any time if I get this wrong, an insurrectionist from holding federal office.
That's right.
They contend the facts that are out there in the world, even though it hasn't been determined by a court or Congress, are so overwhelming that within his or her discretion, a Secretary of State could bar that person from the ballot. They say just like if someone's too young to run or doesn't live in the jurisdiction. I believe Secretary Galvin's response is, well, he's not a big Trump fan either, that that language relates to the criminal code, and until there's a criminal finding of insurrection against an individual like Trump, if the Department of Justice tries him, he has no power to bar him from the ballot. Who's right?
Well, I mean, so far the courts, when this has been in every other state, every court that's ruled on it has thrown the case out. So, I mean, it sounds...
Saying there needs to be a judicial finding.
Saying there needs to be a judicial finding. So as a matter of, technical legal terms, I think Galvin may well be right, although I'm not sure. I mean, it'd be interesting to test it in the courts and see how it goes. But I think the bigger question is, will the Department of Justice actually take up its investigation, and where is that going to go? Because then if former President Trump were to be, in fact, convicted, then I think it's a pretty strong argument. And I think as a political matter, it's really important that people begin to ask these questions, because it is a gray area of the law. And by merely asking the question, getting the news stories, getting everybody talking about it, it changes the political frame and the political conversation. And I think that's a useful exercise, regardless of the technicalities of the law.
Carol
Rose, thank you very much.
It's great to be here.
We've been speaking with Carol Rose. She's Executive Director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. Coming up, we're going to talk with Lee Pelton of the Boston Foundation on insane local housing costs and possibly forcing the best and brightest of Massachusetts to get out of town or never come here in the first place. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, and we are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
The race for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and state auditor are all on the ballot in November's election. And with primary day just weeks away, GBH News is hosting a series of debates to help you familiarize yourself with the candidates. Join us this evening at 6:30 for the lieutenant governor debate with Tammy Govea, Eric Lesser, and Kim Driscoll, here on GBH 89.7 and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Riverwoods Group, the Seniority Authority podcast, is committed to helping people get smarter about growing older, with interviews where physicians, researchers, scientists, and thought leaders answer questions on aging. SeniorityAuthority.org. And Mass Cultural Council, committed to supporting a diverse, inclusive, and an anti-racist cultural sector in the Commonwealth. You can check out their grants and services at massculturalcouncil.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. On Beacon Hill in the early morning hours yesterday, legislators failed to advance Governor Baker's economic development bill. It would have included hundreds of millions of dollars of additional funding for housing development, affordable housing, etc., in what is already one of the most expensive markets in America. Joining us now to discuss our region's unaffordability and what the consequence is, and a new Boston Foundation report on COVID-19 grant making, is Lee Pelton. Lee is the CEO and president of the Boston Foundation. Lee, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see both of you.
Hey, great to see you too, Lee Pelton. Thank you so much for coming in. So obviously we've been talking a lot about Bill Russell this week. He just died at 88, and we're going to talk to you about his legacy in Boston. We'll start with a little sound from Bill Russell. This was a 2013 NBA TV documentary, Mr. Russell's House, and Russell was recalling Martin Luther King's Have a Dream speech.
And you were there for the I Have a Dream speech?
Yes. In fact, I was invited to go on the stage, but I respectfully declined because they had been working on that for more than a year, and I hadn't done anything. And I didn't think it was right or fair to me go up on the stage and say, see, I'm one of the guys. And so I sat in the first row.
Love that.
Not a bad seat, the first row, but he didn't want to go up on the stage. So what are your thoughts? I don't know. Did you grow up in Boston? I should know this, and I don't.
No, I grew up in a foreign country called Kansas.
Oh, Kansas! Oh my God. Okay, so you were not young Lee Pelton.
But you're a huge Celtics fan, yes?
No, I am. Yeah, I moved here to go to school 1,000 years ago. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Don't you love, by the way, anybody goes to Harvard says,
that's right.
I moved here to go to school.
That's right.
I moved here to go to college on the other side of the river. If I went to Harvard, you'd know I went to Harvard. Let me just tell you right now. Okay. I'm sorry, but Bill Russell.
Okay. Well, he's iconic, and we talk about his athletic prowess. I think won 11 championships with the Celtics in 12 years. I think he was MVP for 5 of those years. He became the first African-American basketball coach in the NBA. Actually won a championship, as I recall, as player coach. Two, as part of that. So he leaves a significant legacy. But I almost say that, I should say that growing up, even though I lived in Kansas, I had a sense that Boston was not a place hospitable to black folks. And it really came from Bill Russell. And in our house, we talked about 2 things, one of which was sports, and the other was politics. And the 2 blended together in my household. And when I came here to go to school, and I told my father that I was coming here to Boston to study poetry, he fell out of his chair, not because I was coming here to study poetry, but because I was coming to Boston as a black man. And he sat me down and he warned me about being here. And I know, my father had never been to Boston, but his sense of racism here really came from Bill Russell. And I say that only to say that his influence among black families and black folks way beyond Boston was very significant. Now, on the other hand, there's that iconic meeting between Russell, Muhammad Ali,
Jim Brown, and then Lou Alcindor before it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
That was an amazing summit, and they were all there to talk to Ali to try to figure out who he was and what his plans were. But what they all had in common is that they were outspoken. And what they also had in common is that at some point in their lives, they were reviled by most Americans. Yeah. Ali was reviled. And now, we see him, he's lighting that Olympic torch and the world applauding. But I remember a day when he reviled. And when Lou Alcindor changed his name, he was also in that position. And Jim Brown was, for as long as I can remember, because they were all outspoken.
Yeah.
And it's their outspokenness and they're willing to connect to something outside of basketball or football. For me, that was what I found most appealing about him, and I think that's his legacy.
As a Celtics fan, though, you should have mentioned, as a Kansas guy, there's an important Kansas connection to Bill Russell. Do you know what that would be?
No, tell me.
A particular center for another team in my hometown went to the University of Kansas. That would be Wilt Chamberlain.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah,
That's right.
And
that's
then,
right.
and obviously that bound, they became great friends. You know, one of the lines about race, Marjorie and I mentioned this yesterday, it's so stuck with me, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't think I knew it before. In one of the books he wrote about race, he talked about Boston being a flea market of racism, which so beautifully and painfully captures the world in which he
Well, I said this yesterday, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I remember growing up near here, there was the uppity black guy.
Yeah,
That's what I heard a lot of family gatherings about Bill Russell and about Lew Alcindor and about Muhammad Ali. There was that idea that, hey, these guys should be just happy that they're getting to play in the NBA. It was really
a lot of money,
pretty bad.
Well, you know, there was an unspoken, maybe not unspoken, sort of quota for how many black players that you could have on a football team or a basketball team, and he endured that. And I think it's his daughter who wrote this, I think it was 1987, and she talks about the incredible hatred that they endured, and people coming into the house and breaking in and graffiti all over the wall and defecating in their bed. I mean, this is just incredible stuff. Yeah.
We're talking to Lee Pelton. So, Lee, when I introduced you, I talked about housing. I know it's something that concerns you. There's sort of a double whammy we learned about in this week. Boston has, not surprisingly, the second least affordable rental units after Jersey City, which is really something, which is right across the Hudson, for those who don't know, from Manhattan. That's one. And two, for homeowners or would-be homeowners, the median price to own a single family in Boston is a mere $900,000, $1 million. As I said, there was $270 million for affordable housing, to rehab housing, for public housing in this bill that the legislature never quite was able to resolve in Governor Baker's economic development proposal. What are you doing on this issue that has so many consequences in so many parts of our economic and personal lives?
I think housing is, it may be the most significant issue in the city. You know, we live in a city I've called one of the most unequal cities in America. It is, in fact, that. And this will only exacerbate that. And I think both the mayor, I know she's attentive to this issue, and the state legislature need to double down on making affordable housing, making housing affordable for those who are entering the market, doing something about rental prices, which we know post-COVID are just going sky high, the increases. And also, there's a sort of scaffolding around how we talk about housing if we're talking about the house, but there's all this scaffolding around housing that we need to be attending to. So that, for instance, there's a differentiation in appraisals for black homeowners and white homeowners, about 38% difference. So there's some bias in the appraisals. Even if you account or even if you control for location and schools and this and that, there still is a 38% bias. And so you say, well, what does that mean? That means that if if a white person buys a house for $1 million, that's appraised at $1 million, a black person's house will be appraised for $620,000. That's a big difference. So there's also, credit scores and access to capital. The algorithms for credit scores, which I'm coming to understand, are really regulated, particularly so after the collapse of the housing market in 2008. But nevertheless, they don't take into account experiences that allow folks who have not been engaged in taking on credit to be able to do so, and that's an issue. So it is an issue, not just housing itself, but also the scaffolding around housing. And when we talk about closing racial wealth gaps, housing is the largest fraction of our wealth still, and so we need to be able to have housing that will appreciate, and so and that will allow equity to grow so we can close these gaps. So it's a big issue.
The other thing, Karen Miller, one of our former colleagues here at GBH, wrote this piece for the Globe about the cost of housing possibly tanking the Massachusetts economy. And this makes a lot of sense. If you get out of college here, you come to go to Harvard, you go to BU, wherever you go, and you graduate, and all you can afford is 7 people in some dumpy place over in Alston. It's a real disincentive, especially now with COVID, where you can, post-pandemic, maybe work elsewhere. That's kind of a scary prospect for Massachusetts.
It is a scary prospect. I mean, this is not new, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just not new. I mean, as a college president, I know that many students who used to populate, certain areas close to their colleges now live in places like Quincy, and there's been a big movement, I think, over the last 20 or 30 years from students to Brookline and other places that. Where housing was cheaper, but even there, I think they're going to be priced out of
well, that's exactly. I mentioned earlier on that Jersey City is now the most expensive rent in the country. When I lived in New York City 30 plus years ago, when you couldn't afford to live in Manhattan or Brooklyn, you moved to Jersey City. But because so many people moved to Jersey City, like they're now moving to Quincy and the suburbs, those prices explode too. And when you said a minute ago, Lee Pelton, it's been going on for a long time, this is one of these areas where I fear, and I hate to be my usual negative self, is we're going to talk ourselves to death. But we're never going to confront this problem in a way that will lead to resolution. I mean, I have to say, and I'm sure I'm being unfair to somebody, so my apologies in advance. My buddy who I've known for 30 years, Bruce Marks, who runs this place called NACA, which gets these no down payment loans for homeowners all over the country, just came back from a thing in Miami with like 20,000 people there, has a radical approach to this, which has worked. He might even use the word extorting billions of dollars legally from banks to subsidize this thing. But where are the big ideas on the housing front that have potential to turn this mess around? Do you see them?
There's a lack of them. I will say that one of our impact areas at TBF is in fact housing, mostly focused on affordable housing. And so on, but not exclusively so. And so we've done some good work in this area. And
what are you doing?
Well, we work with the state and with the city in establishing, affordable housing. We also will co-invest in affordable housing.
In projects?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Those sorts of things. Yeah.
But you do look around.
By the way, I didn't even know till our colleague tells Bruce is going to be with us on Monday on the radio. I didn't know he was coming, but he will be here.
But you do look around the parts of the city that's changed so dramatically in terms of building all these high rises. It's like Brighton and Alston, and they're building for the most part these luxury apartments. It seems like there hasn't been a lot of planning. At least, Michelle Wu talks a lot about it. I mean, Marty Walsh talked about it, but he was the former head of the building trades, and he did a great job for the building trades people. So good for him. But and then you hear these developers say, well, they can't afford to build market rate, or they can only afford to build market rate. They can't afford to build even moderate income housing. So there seems to be kind of a conundrum here.
Yeah, it is, and it's complicated, as you said. And I do think it is the issue, at least one of the top issues in the city that needs to be addressed.
But we should be clear. I know when you say city, I think you mean it generically. I know you're Boston, well, not only Boston focused primarily, but as we've said, it's other communities. The lead to Kara's terrific piece is the superintendent of the Provincetown schools had to live way up the Cape. And then ultimately, because she couldn't afford a place in Provincetown, and then ultimately had to quit, I think, in the story.
She had an hour commute from Yarmouth.
Because of the... So while Boston may be the sort of centerpiece of this housing nightmare, it's not the...
And I should have said greater Boston is what I...
That's the deal.
Yeah.
We're talking to Lee Pelton, head of the Boston Foundation.
So another fascinating story today, which when you read it makes a lot of sense, that if you really want to reduce poverty, it's a good idea to have more friendships between rich people and poor people. And I was thinking a lot about Metco, because you see so many people, Cheeto Jackson, that ran for mayor. He came from Boston. I forget which town he went to Metco. I think Andrea Campbell was in Metco as well. A lot of people that have done very, very well that came from tough circumstances go to Brookline or Newton or Wellesley, where, of course, everybody's going to be loaded because they have to buy the $1 million plus houses out there. And I guess it's kids looking at people that have done well, or what's the explanation for this?
Well, let me say a couple of things. First of all, we know that zip codes matter.
Yep.
And zip codes are a greater determinant of, let's say, health equity than genetics or anything else, and who your parents are and what. It's a determinant, and we know that you can look at certain zip codes and you can see these health disparities and so on and so forth. So we know that matters. Where you live and who you live with matters. And I read this this piece more than once, and I need to go back because I think that the methodology is a little suspect.
You do?
I do, yeah. Looking at Facebook friends and sort of extrapolating from that. I mean, they looked at a lot. I think 72% of friends on Facebook from the ages of 22 to 44 or something like that. And then they had to make sort of guesses or estimates about their income and those sorts of things. So I want to reread it again because I'm not convinced that it's a good piece of work. But on the other hand, I think there is some truth to the notion that if you connect with if lower income young people connect with folks outside of your income bracket, folks who have different kinds of experiences, who have different opportunities, who see a world that you don't see. For me, growing up in Kansas, a lot of the world was invisible to kids who grow up here in Greater Boston, especially kids of means. So there's some truth to that.
Let me just say, while you were rereading it, I've only read it once, and it bears everybody reading because they make really strong assertions based on their research, and we'll revisit it with you at some point. Researchers say, I'm reading from the New York Times, economic connectedness, they mean cross-class friendships is what they call economic connectedness, is a better predictor of a community's upward mobility than any other characteristic studied, including, they say, school quality, family structure, job availability, community's racial composition. And while I was skeptical too, my initial reaction was, you and I were talking about the magnet school in Hartford, about how it draws people from the suburbs into the city and that sort of thing. And the only example I could think of, which I know is not a broad enough take, Lee Pelton, so I acknowledge it needs more analysis, is I think we'd all agree that poor kids in schools that are more diverse in all kinds of ways, including economically, generally end up with a better school, which leads to better product for that kid, as opposed to the rich kids being all in their own suburban schools, poor kids being in rural schools. So that's like a touch of this connectedness thing, which does bear out, no?
Yeah, but if you remember in the report, I'm pretty sure that they said that the diversity of the schools that kids go to is less of a factor in economic growth or income than this connectedness that they talk about. So
I chose to ignore that because that was the example that I felt. We will take a look at it. It's in the New York Times. People should check it out. We only have a couple minutes left, but we wanted to visit before you went. You spent a ton of dough at the Boston Foundation during COVID-19 on COVID-19 related things, and I read a summary that was written about your work, And what I was most interested in, you can tell us whatever you think is important for us to know, lessons that were learned, because we spend so much time talking about how the feds have learned so little from COVID in terms of preparing for the next. What did you do and what did you learn?
Well, first of all, let me say, this was before I arrived, and I want to give a shout out to Orlando Watkins, who's our VP and Chief Program Officer. He's really the architect of this, working with other people there. But this was an example of the Boston Foundation at its very best. We have three functions: programs, grant making, donor and donor services, and the leadership. And in this instance, all three of those came together. And how is that? Because we, or I should say Orlando and his team, created this COVID relief fund immediately after March 13th, when this was COVID was I think deemed in the state and even the world as a pandemic. And in that first 10 weeks, gave away several $1 million to almost 200 families. They were small dollars, $25,000, but they made a difference. And they were for, when I say families, I meant nonprofits who work with families and individuals and so on. There were no strings attached. There were no, hoops to jump through. Here's $25,000 to your nonprofit, and you use it as you see fit because you're proximate to the issue. So that was the first phase. Spent about $4 million, $8 million during that first phase. And then in the second phase, this sort of recovery phase, we realized we needed to make larger investments, multi-year grants, in a variety of areas. That was about $9 million there. The Commonwealth came and asked if we would be the fiscal sponsor of their COVID relief fund, and they also contributed about $7 million to that. And then this year, we gave away another $1 million to our equity funds. We have an equality fund, we have a Latino fund, an Asian fund, and so on and so forth. And so there were really three phases, and at the end of it was about $18 million that came out of TBF through this framework. But even more important, I think, is the leadership that we've shown and the way that we were able to bring in partners in this important work.
And that's the takeaway that you think is of value going forward. Yeah. Lee Pelton, good to talk to you. As always, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. Lee Pelton is President and CEO of the Boston Foundation. We very much appreciate his time. Coming up, a new survey shows that a third of Americans feel guilty for taking vacation. Boston Globe travel writer Christopher Muther joins us about that, and a lost luggage epidemic is striking airports around America, if not the world. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
For audiobook lovers, Julia Whalen is a familiar voice, and her new novel, which follows a successful audiobook narrator, peels back the layers of her own job.
I knew, obviously, when I was writing it that I was writing a very meta novel, but when I got into the booth to actually record the book, it just hit different.
Julia Whalen on writing and narrating. Thank you for listening. This afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Innuendo, open now and during the Massachusetts sales tax holiday, August 13th and 14th. You can purchase Hunter Douglas's complete line of automated window treatments. Details at Innuendo Natick and Innuendo.com. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Trusted. Local. News. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the BPL, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now via Zoom by our favorite coastal grandmother. That'd be Christopher Muther. We'll explain that in a few minutes. Christopher writes about all things travel and culture for the Boston Globe. Hi, Christopher. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jim?
Excellent. Thank you.
Hey, Christopher, good to see you. Just want to make a quick correction. Andrea Campbell was not a Metco kid. She went to Boston Latin.
Oh, she did, of course.
Yeah, I made a mistake about that. Tito Jackson was a Metco kid. She was not. So anyway, Christopher, apparently the Chatham Bars Inn has some steep competition down there. A new 5-star hotel nearby. What's the deal?
Yeah, it's for me it was kind of surprising because I always think of Chatham Bars as like the one of the top level hotels down there, and I had never heard of the Chatham Inn, which is not the Chatham Bars Inn, but the Chatham Inn. And an attorney and his wife bought, I guess it was the Cranberry Inn beforehand, and just kind of stripped it down and turned it into a very posh hotel, which is obviously posh because it's now earned 5 stars.
That's right. It's very posh. Now, did you get to visit there, or was it just your colleague from the Boston Globe? I know you were kind of staying in the no-tell motels on your trip to Cape Cod. Was Deborah First able to stay at the Chatham Inn?
Well, this is one of the nice things about being a travel writer without the food writer in tow. I stayed at the Chatham Inn. Deborah did not get the hotel.
Oh, yeah?
Because it was a separate story.
So why is it so posh?
It's part of a chain of hotels called Relais and Chateau.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say chain, it's kind of a loose amalgamation of hotels that essentially you have to reach some standards to be a member of Relais and Chateau. So the owner and his wife, they were very taken with Relais and Chateau properties, and they were determined that the Chatham Inn would become one. So they just kind of kept working at it until they were approved for membership for that organization. And then Forbes came in and did their kind of under the table review and or secret review, and then they get the 5 stars.
So how much is it a night?
$1,200 for Saturday night, August 20th.
Oh!
I'm not done. A mere $700 if you stay over Sunday night, the next night. So it's a mere $2,000 plus tax.
Okay.
For the weekend.
Okay. So
that's it.
Pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar.
Exactly. Okay. Can we talk? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to move on to my favorite story of the day.
Yeah.
The coastal grandmother.
Yes.
Because I am dressed up right now as a coastal grandmother. When I literally were talking about this, I put on my white cardigan. It's not linen, and I'm like kind of my beachy kind of dress and my sandal shoes. This is all the rage apparently. Coastal grandmothers, do tell. Is that a linen shirt or a cotton shirt you're wearing?
It's cotton, but it's total coastal grandmother. It has a lot of movement and flow to it. It's all about, coastal grandmother is all about comfort. It's an aspirational lifestyle.
Aspirational, that's right.
And not everyone, but Gen Z has decided that, this is the lifestyle they want. They want like a beautiful kitchen with a beautiful island and fresh cut flowers and like lots of linen and, boyfriend Oxford shirts, just, cozy mohair throws.
Yeah. The Nancy Myers movies, all those Nancy Myers movies.
Who is Nancy Myers?
I don't like the term chick flick, but it is kind of a chick flick.
What are
right
they?
There. Well, it's complicated with Meryl Streep, where she's in this
with the two guys.
With the two guys.
I saw that.
Alex
the
Baldwin,
ex-husband,
or ex-husband,
somebody else. I saw that.
And Steve Martin, yeah, and the other one with Diane Keaton, where she's having an affair with, a romance with Jack Nicholson, and that I forget what that one's called, but that's
Something's Got to Give.
Something's Got to Give. Something's Got to Give. Yeah, it's all all those
That's
kind
sort
of movies.
That's like the pinnacle of the coastal grandmother movie.
That's
is
right. Lives in a
something-
beautiful
Okay,
house on the
so-
Like
beach.
the lifestyle.
Okay, so the genesis of this was on TikTok from this 25-year-old from California, Lex Nicoletta.
That's right.
And here she is describing this summer's hot new trend. Here it is.
What is coastal grandmother, you ask? It's a term that I coined for this aesthetic. If you love Nancy Meyer's movie, coastal vibes, recipes and cooking, Ina Garten, cozy interiors, and more, there's a good chance you might be a coastal grandmother. And no, you don't have to be a grandmother to be a coastal grandmother. It's for anyone and everyone. I even made this playlist on Spotify so you can have the coastal grand ambiance with you everywhere you go. If any of this sounds like you, follow along and we'll grand together.
And by the way, she has 79, is it 79 songs
I
on
believe so.
Spotify
I had to
be a
download
coastal
it
grandmother
today.
by?
Absolutely.
Why does this have particular appeal to you, Christopher Muther?
I think it has a appeal to a lot of people, not just a coastal grandmother like me.
yourself. Yes. Why is that?
Well, I think one, it's aspirational. Two, there's something like really calming about all of those tones of beige and sand.
That's
and
right.
Glass and there's just something cozy about it. You know, you pull up a bottle of wine, you have some of your girlfriends over, you talk about your ex-husband and his new young girlfriend, and you have some wacky adventures.
That's right. You always have to have buttery Chardonnay. I understand that's very important,
What does that
right?
mean?
The fresh cut flowers. Chardonnay is buttery. I don't know how you tell it's buttery. I guess you ask them at the liquor store or something. But it's supposed to be buttery, and it's supposed to have matching china, right? And you're right, the neutral tones, tans and whites.
Linen
lots of
is
linen.
the key. Linen is the big thing, right?
A linen bathrobe.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be kind of nice? You think of a bathrobe as being terry cloth, have to get out of the shower. But apparently, we coastal grandmothers are supposed to be wearing linen bathrobes. So I have to look into that right away, Christopher.
It's all about, again, like comfort. Aspiration, comfort,
That's right.
and being laid back.
Let me just tell you
reaching
something.
That age. I'm sorry, Jim. I just don't mean to interrupt, but this is relevant to you. It's kind of like reaching that age where you just kind of give up. You can wear flowy things. No one's really looking. You reach a certain point in life, and no one's looking at you anymore. So you can just kind of do your thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's one of your predecessors at the Boston Globe, Diane White, brilliant columnist. You should read her if you ever get a chance. Well, you probably have read her. She talked about how once you get the elastic waistbands, it's a sign that you have given up. You got the elastic waistbands going. There you go.
Okay, all I know is it's aspirational, whatever that means.
It's aspirational. And I'm aspiring to that level of comfort. Actually, Christopher, this is my kind of life.
By the way, you are wearing, your thing is sort of, I know you said it already,
yeah,
it's coastal
right.
grandmother-ish.
I got the necklace on, I got the whole thing.
Yeah. Mine is sort of bi-coastal great-grandfather-ish today. That's the look that I was attempting to.
I was going to say bi-coastal, bipolar, bi-curious.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Christopher, I am amazed that we haven't discussed this topic, which is one of my favorites. I actually think I wrote a piece for the Globe magazine about this years ago. The guilt that Americans feel compared to our Western European brothers and sisters about taking vacations. We don't take them. When we do take them, we feel guilty about taking them. Then the piece explores whether unlimited vacations are the answer. And I will tell you up front, the answer, Marjorie and I have discussed this without you in the past, the answer is not unlimited. The answer is required vacation, that you must leave the office, and a condition for your must leavingness is you can't check your office email, your office text, all that sort of thing. Do you have anything to say about that or no?
I actually 100% agree with you about the vacations and the unlimited vacations and all of that, because it feels like a trap to me.
I agree.
If my boss said to me, go ahead, however many days you need, I would then feel all the more guilty about taking extra days off. Speaking of, you mentioned you did a story on this before. I wrote a story a few years ago about it, and there's just, I think the estimate is that when you think about all the employees in the U.S., collectively, we lose about 500 million vacation days a year.
Oh, my God.
Unused. So essentially, we are, as a country, as a workforce, throwing away $52 billion a year in vacation that we don't take. So it's kind of like, I feel like some employers probably depend on that the way that stores depend on us not using gift cards that we get for Christmas.
That's right.
It's probably just part of the bottom line. But yeah, so there's just this tremendous guilt. And I think now during COVID, there was guilt because there was no sort of delineation between office and home. And, post-COVID, there's still a bit of guilt about not wanting to take time off or being afraid to take time off because you might find yourself.
So what's I should know this, but what is the explanation of the cultural difference where our European friends, Western European in particular, take every single ounce of vacation that's available? And as I said, we not only do not, but that which we do take, we feel, what is it?
They work to live and we live to work.
That is exactly. But where does that come from? Where's that cultural thing come from with us?
Americans are all about the money. Isn't that what we are? Aren't we?
I think it goes back even further to, kind of how the country was built on the back of laborers who, it was like more, more, more. And that's always been what the United States has been about, is kind of excess. Whereas when you think about Europe, it's more subtle. There's more kind of a laid-back coastal grandmother vibe in Europe, where they're watching Nancy Meyers movies for the month of August.
That's right.
Is she a director? What is she?
Yeah, she's a famous director, Jim.
Okay,
You've missed out on this whole phenomenon. Jane Fonda's in one. Reese Witherspoon is in one. They're really great movies. Meryl Streep, you mentioned her before.
I
mean, she sort of epitomizes.
Aspirational, yeah.
Everything is very loose and flowy in the Meryl Streep movies. And she's got not one boyfriend, but two. One of them is her ex-husband, Alec Baldwin. You may not like him, but he's easy on the eyes, is he not?
We may not like him. When Marjorie interviewed Alec Baldwin a day I was off by herself, which ended up being Alec Baldwin interviewing her. And Marjorie before is saying to me, I got to be careful. He abused his child verbally. I got to be tough with him so I don't look like a weakling. She was like a puddle of goo for 20 minutes as Alec Baldwin was asking her about growing up in Fall River, what her life was like.
Whether I had a sweater from the Fall River Knitting Mills. And of course I did. That was it. It was a very embarrassing moment. But, it was Alec Baldwin, Jim. It was tough to resist. You know what I'm saying?
So the next thing we have on the list for you is luggage loss, which apparently has become an epidemic. Now, I have a joke about luggage loss, which I'm going to share with you. I shared it with about 10 of our coworkers this morning. 3 of them laughed, 7 did not. So let's see where you come down here, okay? Are you too young to remember Henny Youngman? Do you remember Henny Youngman? Obviously not. So he was the king of the one-liner. Here's his joke. He walks up to the, whatever the name, the person at the gate, and has 4 bags with him. You with me so far, Christopher?
With you so far.
Okay. And the man or woman behind the desk says, "Sir, where would you like those bags to go?" He said, "I'd like this one to go to Venice, this one to go to London, that one to go to Santa Monica, California, and the other one to go to New Orleans." And the woman or man behind the counter says, "I'm sorry, sir, we can't do that." His response was, "Why not? You did it last time I flew." That's the punchline.
Christopher's not laughing.
What do you think?
I was deliberately holding back any sign.
It's wildly funny, is it not?
I thought it was pretty good.
So what is the story of, let's ignore that. What is are we really in a lost luggage epidemic, Christopher Muther?
We are. I think Europe is having it much more than we are right now. I mean, people in the U.S. have been complaining that this has sort of been the summer of travel hell. In Europe, it is so much worse right now. The lines, the short staffing, the strikes, all of that have just created this storm of, I don't want to say perfect storm, but a perfect storm of lost luggage. And, the staffing shortages combined with the huge, it's, what we've heard over and over again this summer. It's staffing shortages, it's bad weather, it's record demand from passengers. I just read that Heathrow had its busiest consecutive 10 days last week since Christmas of 2019.
What kind of liability does an airline have when you... Didn't you just tell me a story that when you went to Stanford as a sophomore, I guess it was your first year, didn't they lose all your stuff?
They lost my luggage for like a week and a half, but I did eventually get it back.
But that's not such a big... I mean, I'm not belittling that, but you're living there, so waiting a week...
Well, I was also young. It didn't really matter.
Okay, so you're on vacation. You're going somewhere for a week. You don't get your luggage at all until the 6th day. Do they have any liability, or do you sign in that away when you do those little luggage tags? What's the deal?
You're essentially signing it away. The airline, in good faith, is responsible for getting your baggage back to you. And then, for instance, if you don't have essentials, you can listen, Henny young men.
No, by the way, Jamie, who is our leader here, sent me a photograph of Henny Youngman from like maybe 112 years ago, and its intended effect, which was to make me laugh and feel like a fool. Both are working. I'm sorry. Go ahead there. Yeah.
No, anyway, so the gate agent said, we can't send it. And then Henny says, but you did it last week. Oh, wait, sorry. I'm not on that joke anymore.
But I'm bummed. Thank you very
How
much.
about the woman who comes from Chicago to go to Ireland to disperse her parents' ashes over this farm in Ireland, and they lost the ashes
That's bad.
of her mother and her father, and then it turns out they were back home in Chicago, which did her no good. She flew to Ireland.
Well, they gave her substitute ashes. I mean, it was.
That's right.
It was not like
they just cleaned out a fireplace, gave her the ashes, and said, "What's the difference? They're dead. They're not going to know." Or the people that were like stuck. You know, they lost everything. They lost their medicines. They lost their food. They're on a 3-week, was a 7-week trip. They had to
What
go out
kind
and
of
buy.
dope checks your medicines if you need? I'm serious.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you have a lot of medicines. You don't have room in your carry-on because the carry-ons have to be small enough to fit in that space. But these people talk about being on a 7-week trip with 2 kids, 2 and 4. So they had to spend a fortune, right? Go out and buy more shoes, more clothes for everybody, and I think they just got stuck. I mean, the airline didn't pay them back, right?
I mean, there's also the man in Toronto who's moving to San Francisco, and Air Canada lost his cats.
That's not true. Is that a joke?
No, this is no Henny Youngman. This is actually true. I mean, eventually he found the cats, but they had shipped the cats. His flight was delayed. They put the cats on another flight, so the cats made it before he did. But he couldn't find the cats, so
God. That's horrible.
It was pretty horrible.
But they were safe. They weren't roaming the tarmac or anything like that. The cats were still in
No,
their
it wasn't like the cat that we had at Logan who was roaming the tarmac.
Oh, I didn't know about the cat roaming the. Do tell. Is that true?
I saw the story. I saw the story.
I don't remember this.
You know, by the way, you're a big cat guy, we should say. Didn't you visit some cat thing in the Caribbean when you went on the Globe's dime? Did you not do that, or did you not?
I went to a cat sanctuary in Hawaii on an island called Lanai, where 600 cats live in paradise.
Okay, good. Now, listen, first of all, are you in bed? You appear to be in bed. Are you in bed?
He does look like he's in bed. Yeah, he's up against the headboard.
I'm sorry, I know it's early in the day. So
he's a coastal grandmother. That's what they do.
As a coastal grandmother.
Exactly.
No, I actually am in bed, but it's the only place in my house that's quiet because they're doing renovations.
Okay,
so
fine.
This is like the only place.
Okay, so what is that? Even though we ordinarily talk to you about travel,
look at those pillowcases.
That's what made me realize.
I love the pillowcases,
okay, fine.
Christopher.
So of late, we have done almost always in every segment with Christopher, we had a little bit of music. We know he did the ABBA thing in both Sweden and in London, and went to the virtual thing, whatever it was, for $200. So you are apparently, and I've been a fan long before Stranger Things, Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush, one of the great songs ever, but it was made, 30 years ago? Is that what it is?
Yeah, 1985.
And it is the #1 song in the world now. Why? Well, let's play a little bit of it for those. You didn't even know what the song was this morning.
I didn't. I was a big
shocked.
fan of hers, the Heathcliff and Kathy stuff she used to do.
Well, that's Wuthering Heights?
Wuthering Heights.
Whatever it is, yeah. So here's Running Up That Hill, just a little taste of Kate Bush from '85. I wasn't crazy about the God reference, but I totally love the song. And so why is it #1 in the world, not just in the UK? It is #1 in the world right now, 30 years after. Why is that, Christopher Muther?
Well, it's because of Stranger Things, the latest season. It's very, very instrumental in one of the plots of the story. And, it's a big deal. So you hear it a lot. However, my other theory about the song being popular now is that the world in 1985, at least in the United States, we weren't ready for Kate Bush. It's taken us nearly 40 years to kind of gestate and be ready to absorb the genius of Kate Bush.
She is a genius. Do you know? Isn't she? She is spectacular. Yes,
she really is. I mean, as a teenager, to have produced Wuthering Heights, to have written Wuthering Heights, and then you just think about her incredible catalog of music, which I'm hoping Running Up That Hill will be like the tip of the iceberg of the Kate Bush Renaissance. I'm hoping this isn't just a one and done. I would really love to kind of see more of a release, or interest at least, in her back catalog. And you'd think it would be, because the song is #1 in the world right now.
So I said, yes. Do you have anything to say about this, Marjorie, or do you not?
About Kate Bush, I just remember the Heathcliff and Kathy song, which I really liked way back when.
Huh. Is that it?
I guess that's it.
Can I make a suggestion next time? And I should do this off the air, not on the air. If you're going to talk to us while you're in bed, that's fine. But don't pull the covers all the way up to your neck. I mean, that is just, it's really bad form. You don't, like that, for example.
Grandmother, I am allowed to.
Christopher, we love you. It's great to talk to you as always. Be well.
Christopher, thank you very much. Enjoy your coastal weekend. I hope you
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great to see you guys.
You know, I did an interview with him on television a few months ago, and he was drunk, drinking wine.
I saw it.
Live on a, is that true?
I
or
thought
is
it
that,
was champagne.
Excuse me, is that true or is that true? On a ship in the Mediterranean.
You were in a black tie.
Yes or no?
I was not drunk. I was fizzy.
You're fizzy.
Yes.
Fizzy.
Thank you. In the Mediterranean, in a tux, drinking wine on live television. Christopher, talk to you soon. Be well.
Okay. Christopher, thank you very much.
By the way, his series he did with Deborah First, we talked about last week, on four installments about the Cape, is just spectacular.
I copied it, by the way, and gave it to a bunch of friends in the printed form, because there are people that lived on the Cape that had never heard of a lot of these places, so they're able to go have adventures now.
Beautiful.
Because of Christopher Muther and Deborah First. Thank you very much, Christopher.
Bye, Christopher. See you soon.
Okay, once again, that was Christopher Muther. He is a travel writer for the Boston Globe. Up next, GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen returns for a roundup of what's going on around Boston and his thoughts on the latest Brad Pitt summer blockbuster, Bullet Train. He's up next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Even with the kids going off to college, some things get left behind. Trophies from Little League, a closet worth of memories, and sometimes the old family car. So if you've got an old clunker that's oozing oil on the driveway, consider donating it to GBH through our vehicle donation program. We'll do the heavy lifting, like taking care of the pickup, and the money raised helps support the programs you tune in for on GBH. Learn more at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Support for our programs comes from you and Little Leaf Farms, committed to transforming the way food is grown in New England. Fresh lettuce harvested daily in Massachusetts all year round. It's the local lettuce locals love. Learn more at littleleaffarms.com. And Shriners Children's Boston. Accidents happen, and when those accidents involve a burn injury of any size, Shriners Children's Boston is the place to turn for any burn. Shriners Children's Boston, the most amazing care anywhere.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan, live at the Boston Public Library, as we are every Tuesday and Friday, and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. I was afraid I'd get caught with a salad in my mouth when we came back. A fabulous salad from the Newsfeed Cafe, which I just learned from Karen, who runs the show, is now open on Sundays.
Oh, excellent.
As well, the great Newsfeed Cafe, which of course has, what does it have, Jared, sometimes when you're here?
The Spicy Jared.
Exactly.
The Spicy Jared sandwich.
And now we have the Spicy Jared. He is GBH's executive arts editor. Jared Bowen. Jared, it's good to see you.
That's right. Very spicy, Jared is, as we know. So, Jared, you and I talked about this when Jim wasn't here.
I heard that segment. They were great.
Yeah, at Boston Common, Shakespeare in the Common, that they do every summer, and it's wonderful. You can sit up with your blanket and bring a bottle. I guess you're not supposed to bring a bottle of wine. People probably do.
I heard you say that too, actually.
And, hors d'oeuvres, whatever. Or you can sit in chairs, but it's neat to be kind of like like a mini Tanglewood in a way.
Yeah.
So
Just put it in a paper bag.
That's right. Be discreet. But they did Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, and you attended. What'd you think?
I did attend. They're still doing it. They're still doing it through August 7th. This is free, of course, the annual Shakespeare in Boston Common. And people might remember they talked about last week how they've updated this, and it gives it a 1990s sensibility. So when you go to Boston Common, you almost feel like you're looking at a Gianni Versace villa in Miami in the 1990s. It's lots of gilt gold around because the director, Megan Sandberg-Zakian, has set this around the Claudio coming home from the Gulf War. So you have these soldiers coming home, and then Claudio falls in love with Hero. Beatrice and Benedict are a couple that don't necessarily want to be together, but their friends want them to be together. They see how they should be. So rather than slinging arrows, they sling traps for them to come together. It's just, this is a light, fun production. However, sometimes the Claudio-Hero relationship is very tough and especially dynamic. Megan had described how she couldn't quite understand why he had sort of this insecurity and why he had this kind of inner rage, especially when it came to Hero. And she realized, well, he's coming home from the war, so this is comparable to PTSD. So maybe I should stop the review here because that's all I got to see before the rain interrupted when I saw it at about 9:50 p.m. About, 15 minutes before it was supposed to end, so I didn't actually get to see the end.
So they have to stop.
They had to stop, yeah. I was there in my raincoat. I had my little parka over me. I was ready to hold out the rain, and they just decided to stop. But I understand the end.
So here's a quiz for you, Jared Bowen. Who played Hero's father in a high school production of Much Ado About Nothing? Not the major part, but a part, nevertheless. Who did that, please?
Is that a young James Browdy?
That would be correct. Leonardo was me. Or was I? Was I?
It was I.
It was I,
Yeah.
playing Leonardo.
My second guess was Henny Youngman.
I thought your only starring role, Jim, was in
Cowboy on the Moon.
On the Moon?
I wasn't the star.
Jim was
Edward
the Moon?
Mervis was the star. I was the second lead in Cowboy on the Moon.
Jim had a stellar career back in the Quaker school there in
No,
Philadelphia.
actually, no. The Much Ado About Nothing was public school, and the Cowboy on the Moon, which was probably my premier performance, was at Friends School.
Do you still remember your lines?
Did you play the Moon?
I played the sun.
They played the sun.
But the show was about the moon, so it wasn't
And
quite
then he
as.
grew up and became the Sun King.
Look at
Thank
you.
you very much. Okay, can we go from the stage to movies? I have to say, I have seen maybe 3 million commercials for Bullet Train, and I have no idea what this movie is about. It's slapsticky, punching people in the face thing, which is not my kind of deal. But it's got Brad Pitt, who I like quite. Well, what's the deal? You saw it, yes?
So I saw it last night. It opens in theaters this week, and I actually thought this was a perfect venue to talk about this because we're all train people. We all love trains.
Huge, all three of us.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so this is based,
including High Speed, a la Bullet in
Bullet
Japan,
train, which
right?
we'll never see here.
We will never see. That's
so yeah, this sets us down on a train that's going from Tokyo to Japan. Tokyo to Kyoto in Japan, and Brad Pitt plays an assassin who doesn't have very much luck. So he just wants an easy job, which is he's tasked with a snatch and grab of a briefcase on this train, and throughout the course of this journey, figures out that he's on this train with a whole bunch of other assassins that's been coordinated. And I will say that this works because of Brad Pitt. So when this comes on cable in a few months and you watch it, just fast forward and watch all the Brad Pitt parts because the rest is, pardon the pun, everybody's going to use it, it's a bit of a train wreck. This is a director who's trying to do everything, I think, to all audiences. So it's a bit of violence porn. It is trying to be comical. It is trying to be explosive with all the CGI. But I just wish that he had exercised some restraint, the director, because he could have reined this in and it could have been really captivating. I love, we've talked about this, I love this concept like Strangers on a Train or
Orient
the Lady
Express,
Vanishes.
which you rode on.
Exactly, where there's just such a great concept about putting people together in a claustrophobic space.
Well, I don't know if I should waste time even asking, what is the story? I mean, you don't get any inkling as to what the story is from the commercials.
Well, he snatches the briefcase, and then other people try to snatch it back, and then there's a whole bunch of slicing and dicing and shooting and...
Okay, we have some sound.
nature.
We do?
Yes, we do.
That's too bad.
So this is sound from the trailer of Brad Pitt's new movie, Bullet Train.
Hi, there's a gun on.
Run. It's the quiet call. Gotta use your small inside voice in here, son.
There's a gun.
Okay, enough of that. What is it?
Actually, that was probably one of the best scenes in the movie.
Sounds
this
fabulous.
whole fight scene in the quiet car.
Okay, so good. So
I
Brad
love the
Pitt,
quiet car myself, don't you?
Other
It's
than
great.
Thelma and Louise, where he was about 12 years old and fabulous. What's a great Brad Pitt? What is a
He
great...
just got an Oscar.
For what?
That movie that he was in about Hollywood, right?
Oh,
Once Upon a Time in
Parker.
Hollywood. Thank you, John.
I would put him in that category of actors that has really matured well, and he's pretty captivating. I actually just watched him in that funny, or it was okay, but the Sandra Bullock comedy,
I don't like her either.
City of Lost Gold or something like that. What?
I don't like her.
How could you not like?
I just don't. She's in this thing too, isn't she?
Well, you hear a lot of her voice.
Oh,
yeah, she's the handler.
Yeah.
But no, I think he's done some great roles. Yeah, Hollywoodland or the Once
And
Upon a Time in
I
Hollywood
think he's
was great.
supposed to be. Yeah, he got an Oscar for that, I believe.
Yeah.
And he also raised like 6 children with
let's not get into
Angelina
this,
Jolie,
Marguerite.
and
We really
I
don't.
imagine she's a handful. Wouldn't you say?
I have no way of knowing.
Why is she a handful and he's not a handful?
Because I think he was the more paternal.
Well,
of the,
he did talk about having a drinking problem, and that he realized he was a
did?
much better human being if he was not drinking.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they've got many children together, and he always wanted to have children, and blah, blah, blah. I think he's probably a good guy. And we all remember that famous scene in Thelma and Louise where many people thought Brad Pitt was the Cass Meow.
Well, he was a very good-looking young man. He's pretty good-looking, older. Well, he's not
Yes.
old, but an older guy too. He's a pretty
certainly-
good-looking character.
He certainly is.
Okay, so
let's
we
move on.
Okay, we talked a lot about Bill Russell this week, and I'm sure we'll continue to. But one thing we haven't talked about at all, and since you're the arts guy, I figured it'd be a good person to talk to, is the statue that he really didn't want to happen. That finally, 2013, am I right about that?
2013, yeah.
2013. Tell us a little bit.
Well, I visited it yesterday because
Oh.
it was not far from where I had to see the screening of Bullet Train, and it's a really moving statue, I realized. Of course, there's this moment when a lot of people are arriving and they're paying attention, and there are flowers and basketballs and T-shirts, and people are leaving hats, and everybody's paying homage right now. But this is a statue by Anne Hirsch, who is a Massachusetts resident, and she spent a lot of time poring over games and journals and photographs and having a long conversation with him to really distill this. And so we find an 8-foot-tall Bill Russell from the 1960s, this era when he was a player and coach, and he's doing a chest pass. So he's got this ball that he's about to thrust out at you. And if you look at his face, I found this really great sweetness to it. And I think it speaks to, Jim, what you were just saying, that he didn't necessarily want this statue, I think out of modesty, but when he realized that there could be a mentorship program, grant program tied to this, then he was more on board.
I heard that was his condition for doing it. He said to the Celtics, you fund called the Legacy Fund or something, or else I don't do the statue. They agreed, and he said yes.
And that is one of the other extraordinary components of this. So there is the statue of Bill Russell. There are all of these blocks around it, and they're emblazoned with words like friendship, craftsmanship, imagination, teamwork, rebounding, and there are quotes from Bill Russell. But then there are 2 kids, too. There's a boy who's stepping onto one of the blocks, and then there's a girl already on one of the blocks right behind him, and she's astride, and her arms are wide, and she just is filled with confidence. But this is also an interactive statue, so if you step on the block that's in front of Bill Russell when he's doing that chest pass, it's almost as if he's passing to you, and it was very much designed to be interactive. When I was standing there yesterday and all these people were taking photographs, I kept wanting to yell, step up to the block, be engaged with this.
And there are 11 blocks of granite, I read, one for each of his championships with the... So Anne Hirsch...
Granite.
What's that?
Green granite.
Anne Hirsch, we have sound, but before you play the sound, let me just say, Anne Hirsch, who you mentioned from Somerville, I've never heard of her, I don't mean that to disparage her, but is she still a presence in this?
She's still very much, she's working in the public art realm
great.
Across the country.
I'm embarrassed I had heard of her, but she did a great job there. What's the sound we have?
We have sound from the 2013 unveiling of his Bill Russell statue. It's courtesy of NBC Sports, and this is Bill Russell talking.
All I've ever done was to try to never shame my father. The most important thing to me are the friends that I've made. The biggest honor I got playing for the Celtics is they made me the captain. And so I've always thanked my teammates for letting me help them be champions.
Letting me help them be champions. It's amazing.
And I did realize I didn't even mention that the statue is located at City Hall Plaza.
Right.
So if you're walking towards City Hall, it's just to the right with Faneuil Hall beyond that.
Yeah, I've seen it, but I'm embarrassed to say I've seen it is so like on the move that I never even noticed the kids. I'm going to definitely check it on State Street side, right?
Yes,
State
exactly.
Street side, yeah. Talking to Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor here at GBH.
Okay, Jared, tell us about In Company's one, Can I Touch It?
Yeah, this is a great production. This is Pay What You Want at the Strand Theater, and it's playing through August 13th, which I love. Isn't that fabulous? So this is accessible to everyone. So if you can afford a full-price theater ticket, absolutely pay that. But if you can't pay anything at all, you can just go and sit down and enjoy this show. But this is by the local playwright Francisca de Salvira, and she has written what she knows. Growing up in Dorchester and Roxbury, we find this settles on a beauty shop supply store owner who is seeing her neighborhood change around her in Dorchester and Roxbury. And we open with her at a bank, and she's trying to get a loan so that she can keep her business going. But she's also somebody who's known in the community as being something of an activist, trying to keep the community intact, and she wants to preserve a bakery which had been vacated. Meanwhile, the bank is more likely to support a residential building that's about to go up and just change the whole nature of the community. So there's that dichotomy, and is her loan conditional on her stepping back? And so you have her as somebody who's seasoned and a business owner. And then you have her daughter and her niece who are much more activist-minded and want to get out there and make videos and create change. And she has to reconcile this change and this generational change, and they may not be looking forward to recognize what their big splash approach may take. And so it's a very, I would say, absorbing show, also hilarious at times, and very well presented, directed by Summer L. Williams. We've had her on the show here, and a terrific cast as well.
How often, I've never heard of a show doing one of these pay what you can kind of things. That restaurant in City Hall Plaza closed after discontinued and closed, didn't work out. Is it working there, or is it too soon to tell?
I haven't talked to them about the business model, but they've done it for a few summers now, accounting for the pandemic too, and they're able to keep doing it, which is great. And by the way, Can I Touch It is the name of the show, and it's a reference to their hair. There are certain segues in the show where all three of the female actors step forward on the stage and they pose a question like, can I touch it? Which are questions that a lot of people of color are asked. Is your hair real? Can I touch your hair? Things of that nature. And these three women describe what the responses should be. And when I think about this, I think back to a conversation I had with Sonia Clark, the artist, who talks about your hair is your DNA. Your ancestors are in there. Everything, your whole history is there. So that's why it's even more precious, and especially when you're confronted in that way.
Do you remember, speaking of hair touching, one of the most beautiful, Pete Souza, a local guy from Dartmouth, I think, was obviously Obama's photographer. Now he's essentially casting shade, as they say, for years on Donald Trump and great stuff he's doing. Remember the photograph of the little boy who's standing in the Oval Office with Obama and says something like, your hair is just like mine? And the President of the United States bends over and lets this little boy who's like 1.5 feet tall, looks like, touch his hair. It's one of the sweetest Obama moments. Just this beautiful, beautiful little thing. By the way, a lot of texters are taking me to task. We discussed Moneyball yesterday with Katie Kroll, the coach for the Portland Sea Dogs. Moneyball was Brad Pitt.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of people were saying he was fabulous in Moneyball.
And Big Short and Inglourious
Big
Bastards.
Short.
Yeah, he's had
Legend,
quite...
Well, I take it all back.
Legends of the Fall.
Okay.
That's kind of...
A River Runs Through It.
A River Runs Through It. Legends of the Fall was long, but it was
long.
It was good. Did you like it?
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
There are a whole slew of movies I feel like I have to just go back and rewatch, but there's always peril in that. Things that you treasure from earlier in your life.
You know what I did? One of the worst mistakes I ever made in my whole life. I love mystery thriller movies. There are not enough of them. And I told Marjorie for about the first 10 years we knew each other. Do you remember this?
What?
That there was a movie called... oh, damn it.
Jagged
Edge. John, how do you... John Parker, our colleague, is talking to us.
He remembers everything.
I said, you got to see Jagged Edge. For 10 years, I said she never saw it. And then you finally watch it. How was it?
Well, I forgot to
Was
tell
it
you
Glenn
this,
Close?
Jim.
I was going to say,
Jeff Bridges.
I thought it was horrible. However, my sister and one of her best friends watched it the other night. And I forgot to tell you this, and they thought it was great.
Well, you know what happened? When you came back to me and said how horrible it was, I was really embarrassed. And to prove that you were wrong, because obviously my opinion is everything, I then went and watched it again for the first time. Horrible. I mean, absolutely. And by the way, it doesn't mean it wasn't great at the moment. It just didn't hold up like a lot of things you love. It's this fabulous mystery. They're both great, but it is not something I'd see now, maybe 20 years after it was made.
Yeah, well, my sister liked it, Jim, so I meant to tell you that.
I'm very glad to hear that.
She vindicated you somewhat. But you're right, Brad Pitt has had quite a storied career from Thelma and Louise. Remember, he robbed Gina Davis.
He did, yeah.
Yes, he took her to bed and he robbed her.
Yeah, how dare he in that hotel room.
That's right. But he looks so cute in his
That movie, which I saw about 6 or 7 years ago, does hold up.
Thelma and Louise?
Thelma and Louise. They are brilliant. The two of them
I haven't
are
seen
just
that in a long time.
spectacular.
When they go off the cliff in the Thunderbird?
In any case.
Or do they?
Remember,
it's just
Spoiler
suspended.
alert.
Of course it did, yeah.
Okay. At the Grand Horizons?
Grand Horizons,
What's the deal? This sounds great. What's the deal?
This is hilarious. This is a play by Beth Wall, and it's up at Gloucester Stage Company. It's playing through August 21st. It just opened. And so we find a couple who have been married for 50 years, and they're played by Paula Plum and Richard Snee, two actors who are married in real life. So if you know that going into it, you're watching with a completely different lens, I feel like. So they've been married for 50 years. The characters are in their late 70s, and the first scene is them having dinner. She's preparing the dinner, he's setting the table, everything is done in silence. They have their whole nightly choreography of putting the pepper on the table, putting glasses on the table without ever speaking, and then she announces she wants a divorce. So this, of course, is hugely traumatic to the family. So their grown sons come home. One is single, he's gay, he comes home, and his brother comes home with his therapist wife, and they need to start to dissect what has happened here, that their parents married for 50 years, that the relationship is exploding. All the while, they're living in Grand Horizons, a new independent living center. And so it becomes this really absolutely hysterical and hilarious look, in part because Richard Snee and Paula Plum have such masterful comedic timing, but about what marriage is. Does marriage mean love? Does love fuel marriage? What does it mean when you're the children of parents who want to divorce? What does it suddenly say about who you are in your own identity? And all of this gets explored in this very, very hilarious comedy.
Is Gloucester Stage Company the small venue?
Yeah.
And that's where I saw it. Remember we had Phoebe Potts on from Too Fat for China?
Yeah. Yes.
That's where I saw Too Fat for China. It is a great, great venue because you're right on the stage. It is really terrific.
Isn't one of the things, at least in the story I read, that the family presumed that they were just quite contented in their 50-plus year marriage?
Well, yeah, isn't that a thing to walk out of this theater and think, well, what's the real relationship between my marriage? What haven't they shared with us yet?
That's
and why does this surface after 50 years? What awakens in somebody to suddenly realize I only have so much time left, and this is going to be my me time? Uh-oh.
She was running off with Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
Could that be?
Okay, and let's talk about it.
I don't want to give
what.
spoiler alerts.
Okay, now when we ask you, so what are you doing Friday night? Your answer, unfortunately, for the next few weeks is, I'm going out to dinner and a play. Is that correct? Are you in rerun? What are you exactly?
Yeah, we're reinventing the show for the fall.
Oh, we are?
So, but for the moment, you can find all of our past episodes and content online.
You're reinventing your show?
We're looking at different ways of doing things to add more content.
We are?
Yeah.
Should we be reinventing our show?
Oh, now you're going to be nervous, for the next 3 days.
It's time to reinvent.
Jared's reinventing his show.
Right.
Should we be
Well,
reinventing?
I was about to say, because we're about to turn 10 years old next year.
happy
but so
10
are
years.
you guys.
Oh.
We are?
Are we?
I think our show started around
I think we started in
2013.
February.
Yeah, you're right. 2013.
And Open Studio
I think
started.
we're almost 25 years together on the radio, too. Which
That
is
was
really
1999.
That was the year I
it's
was
almost
born.
25. That's funny. It's not that funny, Jared.
You've been plodding along here for all these years. That's right.
By the way, I want you to know, a lot of people are texting saying, why can't you tell more Henny Youngman jokes after the one I told?
You didn't
and the
say
reason
the most
is,
obvious one.
Well, because it's sexist. Every joke of his, I know that, take my, you can't, because they're all really sexist. And I want to get suspended.
Did you see this latest text?
No.
Why wasn't Brad Pitt in Secretariat?
He is moving like a tremendous machine.
Thank you very much.
The best movie of all time, of course. He missed his
Okay, let's
opportunity.
move
He could
on.
have been the stable boy.
He could have been.
So you think he would have been great?
Thank you.
Of course he would have been.
Absolutely.
There's only one answer to that question.
In chaps with no back, right, Marjorie? Thank you. That's what you're thinking.
I have chaps.
I
Do you
bet
have
you
chaps?
do.
Oh, he's a big horseman.
you are a
know.
big horse
Jared
guy.
was out in Montana, and
I know,
boy,
let's
he
not
can really
get
ride
into
a horse.
I'm scared of
You sent me a
horses. I don't
picture
want to talk
of
about it.
galloping along at a really breakneck
Hey, before you
pace.
go, the final discussion we have here with our listeners for the final 20 minutes is going to be about the importance of pickles in their
Right.
lives. Are you a pickle guy?
I'm a total pickle person.
And like, what kind of what's like high on your pickle list?
Well, dill.
Yeah.
What are they called? The
bread and butter
Bread
ones?
and butter?
No,
I
they're
don't know.
Swedish?
No.
Yeah,
I don't
okay,
know.
fine. That's good enough. Marjorie's not into
pickles,
pickles, so
I'm not
okay.
into pickles, but we're going to discuss it up next because it's a very important issue. We're going to get to the bottom of it.
Jared, good luck with the reinvention, whatever that means, and see you soon. Thank you so much for your
We
time.
have
answers.
We have been speaking with GBH Executive Arts
We have.
Editor Jared Bowen. Vegetable? What is a pickle?
It's got
Vegetable?
seeds.
Okay.
'cause
Is it really?
All work and no play makes adults less happy and more stressed.
One of the biggest misconceptions about play is that it's irrelevant, it's not important. But there's lots of evidence that if we put play first, that can have a big benefit on our well-being.
All this week, we're talking about the benefits of play for people of all ages. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Maine Maritime Museum, presenting Zach Horn, Looking for Winslow Homer, an installation inspired by the same rhythmic beauty of the sea captured by Homer, now through November 27th. MaineMaritimeMuseum.org. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the library as we are every Tuesday and Friday, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. When you're strolling through the snack aisle, you may have noticed that one flavor is popping up more and more on chips, dips, and a whole host of other foods. It's not barbecue nor salt and vinegar. It is pickle flavor. In a piece in yesterday's New York Times, Christina Morales highlights the pickle's, quote, bigger, bolder, brighter, and sourer appeal. She crowned it the flavor of the summer. Others disagree. Here's the debate summed up pretty succinctly in this clip from the 1994 version of The Little Rascals.
Do you like pickles? I think they stink. I love pickles. My mother makes me eat them. I'm crazy about them.
Pression. We want to know where you stand. Are you buying up every pickle-flavored snack you can get your hands on, or does the whole thing leave a bad taste in your mouth? It's a horrible line. I shouldn't have used it. What is your relationship to the pickle and what it has been like in your life at 877-301-8970. Now, I want to declare up front, nobody loves a good pickle more than I, a particular kind of pickle, particularly half sours.
Yep.
However, I do not, and I like pickles on certain sandwiches, like Cuban sandwiches, that sort of thing. I cannot stand pickle-flavored anything except a pickle. I don't want a pickle-flavored pizza.
You don't?
I don't want a pickle-flavored chip. I don't want pickle-flavored, what are those little fish called? Goldfish they have now?
Goldfish.
I don't want anything except a pickle. And where are you on the pickle issue, Marjorie?
Well, I'm not that into pickles myself, but apparently they are all the rage. Frito-Lay's making a pickle-flavored chip for Lay's potato chip. Doritos and Ruffles lines. You're going to get pickle-flavored Doritos. Trader Joe's carries a dill pickle falafel and says its dill pickle seasoning blend sold out soon after it hit the shelves this spring. Blue Diamond Almonds released a spicy dill pickle version a couple of years ago, and they say people are crazy about these sour and spicy flavors. They want them in snacks. So
Rebecca just writes to us, our coworker, the corner store near me sells pickle-flavored vodka. I mean, that just does. But I'll tell you, if you go to the old delis, like the Carnegie before it closed, you wouldn't be into this. But when you sit down at your table, you know what you have a huge vat of plop down?
Pickles?
Pickles, yeah. I mean, oh my God.
Well,
it's
apparently
great.
the younger, under 40 set is looking for bigger, bolder, brighter, and sourer flavors. That's according to the New York Times. All the news is fit to print, so it has to be true, Jim. 877-301-8970 is the number. You can call us or text us at that number. What are you laughing at?
I'm laughing because one of the things you can judge in terms of the intensity of feeling about a topic is, it usually takes, when we announce a topic, maybe a minute for all the lines, our telephone lines, to light up. I would say it took about 2 seconds after you said the word pickle.
Pickles.
In the tease to
Lines
this
are full.
segment, when the lines became full.
It's all the rage.
And it is apparently all the rage. You want to start with Jen in Shrewsbury?
Let's start with Jan in Shrewsbury. What do you think, Jan?
Hey, Jen, what's up?
Hi, good afternoon.
And to you.
My husband.
Your husband?
Hello?
Is a
Yep,
pickle. Yes,
we can
what?
hear you.
Your husband what?
Oh, my husband and I eat pickles on everything. He takes hot Italian pickles for lunch every day.
And when you say on everything, what does everything mean? Like sandwiches, correct?
Oh, on every sandwich.
Okay.
And then we have a burger place, pizza place in town. Jim, you said no pizza, but they make a burger pizza. Oh my God, it's covered with dill pickles. It's phenomenal.
I don't know if I could do that. You know, Jen, how about
pickle pizzas are supposedly getting to be huge.
I know that, and obviously they're big in her town of Shrewsbury. Now, Jan, the one pickle that even pickle lovers will not cross the line for, do you know when you go to like the supermarket and sitting on the deli counter is like a pickle in green liquid in a plastic sealed bag? Is your husband or you, are you willing to do that?
Nope.
Good.
Nope, can't do that. But we go to Ryan's Deli on Route 84.
Oh, I've been to Ryan's Deli. Of course I have. On the way to New York City.
Phenomenal.
I've been there many a time.
Perfect.
Jan, is that Route 84? Is that what that's on? I think so. Jan, thank you very much for the call. So there's a pickle freak to start our discussion.
Well, let's talk about this Boston Globe piece about the Maitland Mountain Farm in Salem is more widely known now as a prolific pickle maker. Holly and her husband, Andy, they make 40 kinds of pickles, sauerkraut, and kimchi. Wow.
Wow, yourself. By the way, do you know what? Do you ever buy Grillo pickles at the supermarket?
I don't like pickles.
I thought you told me you did like certain kind of pickles.
I like one kind of pickle. I think it's
that still counts.
The dill pickle, but I don't want any
dill
pickles
pickle is a big
on
thing.
my sandwiches. I don't want the brine.
No one's making you eat them on your.
I don't want any pickles on my cheeseburgers.
I don't like the pickle liquid. If that's what you're saying, I don't like that either.
And I don't understand why this picture of a pickle, like the McDonald's.
You're gonna hold this up?
Well, you can't see it because we're not. This is a radio show.
Yeah.
But
we're actually streaming. Thank you.
Yeah, we're streaming. Okay, there's the picture of the McDonald's.
That's
pickle.
going well, I think. Yeah, it's a little dot on a piece of paper.
Wall,
yeah.
and it's selling for $6,277.
It is?
It's a pickle with a little smudge of ketchup. Why would you want that on your wall, Jim?
I don't want it on my wall, so I don't know why you asked me a question. Patrick in New Hampshire, we're talking pickles. Welcome to the show, Patrick. What's up?
Well, thank you for letting me tell you my little story about pickles.
Please.
I was a chef for about 30 years, and I've had several food epiphanies in my life. And once was when I was 9 years old, living out in the Berkshires at Samuel's Delicatessen. And my father took me in there. He was getting a sandwich, and I saw the pickle on the counter. And I said to him, "Can I have one of those pickles? I'd never had one before."
Mm-hmm.
And they're these big, whole dill pickles.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, if you do, you've got to eat the whole thing."
Uh-oh.
So I get the pickle, and they're 5 cents. And I take a big bite of it, and it's the most amazing explosion of flavor into my mouth. I've never tasted anything like it in my life. I'm so happy. I said to him, "One of these days, I'm going to come in here with $1 and I'm going to buy that whole jar."
And
I thought that was a very interesting part of my life.
So
I spent the rest of my life in food service.
So did pickles figure into your
chefdom?
chefdom? Is that what you're saying?
Very much so. I've made many different kinds of pickles throughout my life. I now sell food for a living, but I absolutely adore pickles.
Before you go away, one of the things, I don't know why I thought of it with you, but the fried pickle has become a phenomenon in the last few years, too. Are you a fried pickle kind of guy?
Well, I am. It has to be a certain kind of pickle, because if they're too sour when they're fried, they're just too much to bite, I think.
Oh.
Yeah,
Hey,
the crunch of the pickles is
Patrick,
attractive.
thanks for the call.
I like that part.
But I don't like eating. When you get a pickle, even the kind you like a dill, you slice it, right? You don't like when you eat it
I eat it whole.
You just you put the whole pickle in
it in my hand. Yeah, I don't slice it up
at all. You do?
Absolutely.
It's very bold.
I think it is very bold.
Yeah.
And pickles, I'm learning now, are a coastal grandma food. And we talked earlier about being coastal grandma. There's neutral colors. Your white cashmere.
Why are pickles a coastal grandmother food?
Cardigan sweater. I don't know.
Cardigan, not cardigan.
Cardigan sweater, white cardigan sweater, which I'm wearing in honor of Coastal Grandmother Day. Pickles are the best, says a texter. You need acid when cooking, and they add the perfect crunch. My favorite is peanut butter toast with sriracha and pickles.
Well, there you go.
What do you think of that, Jim?
I think not much of it. Michelle in Concord, you're on Boston Public Radio, and the topic is pickles. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if you discussed how pickles are made, but they're a kind of cucumber.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're in a brine of vinegar and various spices, and a dill pickle is with lots of dill. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, the only pickle my Dutch husband will tolerate is by bubbies.
By who?
B-U-B-B-I.
Oh, Bubbies. Yes, I know. I think I know.
Pickles.
Yeah.
They're in mostly gourmet stores or health food stores. I think Whole Foods. But they're always crunchy, and they're a great balance of the sourness and the spices. They're just great.
That's a great recommendation, Michelle. Thank you for the call. Here is Jean in Rhode Island says, in her autobiography, Swanson on Swanson, silent film star Gloria Swanson relates feeling blue as a teenager and stopping in to treat herself to a dill pickle. She said that in those days you would munch on a pickle the way teenagers now munch on a pickle. Oh, the way teenagers now would buy a candy bar or Coke. Could go part way to explaining why everyone in those old photos is so much more slender than today's average person. I've been on about 100 diets in my life. Pickles, I just realized, I often do the pickle thing, even though salt retains liquid, which is not a good thing, I just realized. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, you would know. You've never been on a diet your whole life.
I think it does. Yes, I have.
Wait a second. No, the only time you were on a diet is when you were stoned in Stanford. You told me this story, and you swallowed bread that hadn't risen, so it rose in your stomach. Is that correct?
Stomach. Yeah, it was still cooking in my stomach. I thought co-ed killed by baking bread in the stomach. I thought it'd be in the front page of the Palo Alto Times. Stomach explodes. What an ignominious way to die, but I did survive, obviously. Rebecca says one time she tried to make a pickle snow cone by putting pickle juice on snow. She does not recommend it.
Well, that's good to hear.
For anybody else. Let's go to Andy in Cambridge.
Hi, Andy.
Good day. Well, I'm an unhappy camper on the summer of pickles.
Mm-hmm.
My dad is a physicist at Stanford. Marjorie, shout out to you.
Oh, yeah.
Cross-country trip, camping along the way, and at one unfortunate spot, a Vlasic pickle factory was next door, and so all night I was tortured by that briny, terrible smell, and to this day I will never touch a pickle, and my wife gets all of my pickles at the S&S in Inman Square.
Let me tell you, that is the saddest story we've ever had told on the air, Andy. Thank you for sharing that. S&S Deli is a deli that's been there for about 100 years, a legendary deli just down the street from my house. Now, Cy, our colleague,
from engineering,
who's one of the great engineers here, he's spectacular, says, please don't forget, there are other kinds of pickled foods like carrots, onions, radishes, etc., all delicious. I'm assuming you don't like any of them. Is that correct?
I knew Cy was a pickle man the moment I saw him. I knew. And now he's confessed.
Yeah, he does have that look, doesn't he? He really.
That's right.
I had never thought of it, but now that you say it, it is obvious.
Absolutely. I could tell it. When he was fixing my email, he had that briny kind of
thing
going on there.
But by the way, I know you well enough to know you would never allow like a pickled carrot to cross your lips. Is that true?
I don't like those things. I don't like the pickled carrots. No, I don't like them one little bit.
I hope you take that personally. Bob in Plymouth, you are next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about the pickle experience, which apparently is huge, but apparently particularly for people under 40, and Marjorie and I are not that kind of person.
No, we're not.
Go ahead.
the people under
We
40,
were once.
We were. The people under 40 are looking for, like Cy, are looking for bigger, bolder, brighter, and sour flavors, food and beverage researchers say. And pickle seasoning is also very versatile,
Good.
Jim.
Do you want to hear from Bob or not?
Sweetness and sourness and subtle enough to add other flavors.
Whatever. Now, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob. Hello to you.
The legendary Jim Browdy and the always wonderful Marjorie.
That's
exactly.
right.
You're right
Thank
on
you for
both
calling,
counts.
Bob.
Thank you.
All right, I got two quick things for you here.
Please.
The pickleback.
Yep.
You take a shot of pickle juice and a shot of whiskey.
I hope you have something better than that. That is the worst thing I've ever heard. Go ahead.
I laugh my butt off every time I see this, but go online and look up Pickle Stage.
Pickle
Pickle
Exchange?
with Nicolas Cage's face on it.
Wait,
Pickle Stage.
I didn't hear what.
Spell the word, will you please? Not pickle. We know how to spell pickle. The other word.
Pickle Stage. C-A-G-E.
As Page.
It's a pickle that has Nicolas Cage's face
Oh,
on it.
C-A-G-E. Oh, we got it. We're going to check. Marjorie's
Okay, I'm
checking it
looking
out
up
now.
Pickle Cage right now.
Bob in Plymouth, thank you very much for the call there. Pickle.
It seems to be
like
people
Nick Cage. People
dressed
say.
up. Yeah, Nicolas
As pickles?
Cage dressed up as a pickle.
As a pickle?
And they have a picture of him, and it's Pickle's Cage.
Yeah.
You know
What's really good, by the way, now that we're on radio, it's really good when you hold all those
I
things
know,
up.
I'm
It's
sorry.
really helpful.
You
Why
can-
don't you hold it up to the camera again, and it can look microscopic
You know
like
what you
the
can get,
photograph of
Jim?
the
I did not
McDonald's
know this.
pickle.
You can get Pickle's Cage gifts and T-shirts with Nicolas Cage dressed up as a pickle.
Oh, here it is.
on
It's
the
right
front.
on our Comrex screen.
Yeah, there you go.
Pickle's Cage is what they call him. It's pretty clever, actually.
That is pretty funny.
By the way, did you see the video of Aaron Rodgers doing a Nicolas Cage imitation?
I heard it's pretty
Walking
funny.
a can. It's pretty great, actually.
Yeah.
Greg in Boston, you are next. Whoa, a pickle farmer on Boston Public Radio.
Oh, my God.
Take it away, Greg.
No, I'm not a pickle farmer, but my last name is Pickle Simer.
Oh.
And
yeah. Close enough. That's okay.
Close enough. Yeah. And growing up, and even now, a lot of my friends call me Pickle or Pickles. And but I like pickles, but not on things. I like them just by themselves. I don't put them on sandwiches, burgers, God forbid pizza, or whatever. I don't do that. I love pickles though, but just on their own.
Can I tell you
but
something?
My sister.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, my sister, my twin sister, she actually loved peanut butter and pickle sandwiches.
I've heard of those.
A kid.
Oh.
Yeah.
Marjorie loves peanut butter, but she's
do.
not doing the pickle thing.
I do. Thank you for
Hey,
the
Greg,
thank
thank
you for
you.
the call, Greg. Meredith from Needham says when she craves potato chips, she eats pickles instead because they're healthy and crunchy. And somebody is telling us a tale about one of our producers, Rebecca. She was at a bodega a few weeks ago on a hot day with Rebecca. Of all the snacks or drinks you could get at the bodega, Rebecca chose a packaged pickle in a bag. It was the most disgusting thing she's ever seen. All I can say is Rebecca really likes pickles and will eat them just about anywhere, including from the back of a Boston bodega.
Like I will eat, as you know, anything. And,
Yes.
But
Yep, you will.
that is a lot. I'll even eat the greenish hot dogs and the soubrette carts on the corners in New York
God.
City. Have you ever seen one of those pickles in the plastic bag in the liquid?
No, I don't want to
hanging
see. I don't
from
want
the
to see one
deli
either.
counter?
The green hot dogs are bad enough, Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you for ending on that picturesque note today, because we are done.
By the way, half sours. No one's asked me, but that's really
That's
what
the way to go?
That is
Not the dill?
And they're crispy and
Okay.
they're green.
They are
They're
crispy.
bright green.
You can bite right into them. We're done. No more
We
pickle
are?
talk. No more
That's
pickle talk
sad.
for today. Maybe we'll continue this tomorrow. I always say you can't get enough pickle talk in
Can we
July,
do like
Jim.
a whole 3-hour pickle extravaganza? No, I'm serious.
I think
Sports
so.
radio, they talk about the same thing every day for like 6 months.
Why not?
Why can't we do it?
I think I can't wait to revisit
I think we should do that.
the pickle conundrum. Anyway, we are done for today at least. Thank you very much for listening to Boston Public Radio. Thank you very much to people that came
Thank
down
you
to
for
the Boston
coming. We appreciate
Public
it.
Library. Tune in tomorrow for our medical ethicist Art Kaplan. Juliet Kime, we can talk to her about this national security stuff, which is kind of scary right now with Al-Qaeda, and of course with Nancy Pelosi
in
over in
Taiwan,
Taiwan. Also, Lydia Downey from the Pine Street Inn.
Oh,
Our
great.
travel guru, Rick Steed, is going to find
great.
out what's going on in Europe post-pandemic, or sort of post-pandemic. And Boston Globe love letters, advice columnist Meredith Goldstein. Love to talk to her. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas, Rebecca Tauber. She's the one that eats all the pickles. With additional support from Gina Orcio, who wrote a great piece in the Globe about that poor hiker who died
was really
on Mount
impressive that
Washington.
she did that.
Our engineer, John the Claw Parker, our executive producer, Cy Bologna, and special thanks to the BPL engineering team today, Colin Cockrell, Angelica Marrero, and Pickleman Cy
Pickleman himself.
Vitale. So, what is going on your show tonight, Jim?
Well, we have night 2 of our 4 primary debates. Last night we did the Attorney General candidates on the Democratic side. Tonight we have the 3 candidates for Lieutenant Governor on the Democratic side. Now, Marjorie, I know you wanted to spend the last few seconds saying who the 3 candidates were.
For Lieutenant Governor?
Who are they? So Marjorie will be watching tonight at 7 o'clock, and you should too.
Hey, let me tell you something, Jim.
What?
Nobody does a debate like you.
Oh, thank you.
I wouldn't bother having me in the debates because really you're better off doing
Actually,
them alone.
I have to say, no, in all
you go really
seriousness,
quick.
we'll do the final debates together as we have for years and years. I am Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. Meanwhile, have a great day. And don't forget to watch Jim's Lieutenant Governor debate tonight at 7 o'clock. Right, Jim?
It is.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
See you later.